Hello, Hal. Do you read me, Hal?
Affirmative, Dave. I read you.
Open the podcast doors, Hal.
Yeah, all right, good.
Open
good
the
job.
podcast doors, Hal.
What else could you do?
Well, I'll tell you what I wanted to do. And I felt like people would have been ripping their hair out if I didn't do that, just because we rarely have a line that
Pod.
infamous that has pod in it.
Very famous line.
I'll tell you what I wanted to do.
What?
Pod.
Yeah, right. That's the other. Gas.
Pod. Podcast.
Yeah, that'd be funny.
Podcast.
I
Pod.
think you made the right choice.
Yeah.
Pod. Podcast.
What if someone did that now?
I mean, this is funny.
Podcast.
Uh-huh.
The pipe organ stays.
I know.
on.
You're better at holding.
What if, like,
we couldn't sync up there on when it's a pod and when it's a cast. It's a hard choice.
what
if
if
you know
like,
the planets don't always align?
Of course.
you need a fellow like Stanley Kubrick to
You
make
need-
sure
you
those
need a Kubrick
planets
to line up those planets.
Yeah, not every schmo can do that.
Not every schmuck can do it. What were you gonna say, David?
what if like Jurassic
Open
Park?
the podcast doors, David.
Yes, done. It's
Are
gonna
they
be slow.
open?
Yeah, very slow.
Like Jurassic Park Dominion, like some big movie from this.
Great
year.
movie. Yeah,
Sure. Opened
functional movie.
Opened with
Kubrickian.
like a shot of the planet Earth and the sun rising with
Yeah.
with also Sparks
Yeah.
Zarathustra, however over
Your
it.
German is terrible.
Just no joke. Just did that.
Yeah.
And then someone asks the direct, Trevor or whoever, why'd you do that? He's like, oh, it's an homage to 2000. Like, what if someone actually just plainly
did it.
was like, oh, I love that opening.
Yeah,
The most famous movie opening of all
Yeah.
time.
I just
You
did
can
it.
only do that once. You can only do what he did
Well,
one
a lot of
time.
parody movies have done it.
That's fine.
That's fine, but you're
because
saying
then it's for like a bong,
Yeah.
Right.
or a hamburger. You
Right.
know, oh, we get it.
Right.
It's not the majesty of.
But
the
it's also
heavens.
funny that like it does feel like if you do something that even vaguely resembles this on any level, people go like, "Was that an homage to 2000?"
Right.
Like you can't open a movie with a planet,
no.
Not-
essentially,
and classical music like
or
thunderous.
one
classical-
or the other. I feel like people will be like, "Is that a 2001 thing?"
I'm
Is it a
really
Kubrick
excited
thing?
that we began the show. By the way, I've been on the show and I've never been introduced, so I'm going to introduce myself.
Oh, boy.
Do it. Have you really never been introduced?
It's a running bit. It's funny.
Okay.
I've maintained it, and people have in fact called out my comedic consistency, my
No,
commitment
it's what we love.
to this bit. Yeah.
Do you guys know what Cowper's fluid is?
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
Because-
Okay.
What is Cowper's fluid?
well, it's
What is the
Cowper's gland
street,
is.
What is the street name?
See, I don't know. I wasn't like David
look, I mean, and
claiming
we're-
I knew.
We're starting early, and this is the 2001 episode, but he's talking about pre-cum.
Pre-cum. Cowper's fluid, which I could be pronouncing it correctly.
I think you're pronouncing.
No,
it.
you're pronouncing it
known
correctly. Yeah.
on the street
Yeah,
as pre-cum.
sure.
The first
Going for the big dollar these days on the street.
the first shot,
Yeah.
if I may use the word shot,
Yeah.
of 2001: A Space Odyssey
Uh-huh.
is a shot of pre-cum.
Oh boy.
And I swear to God, I'm not making this up. And I really do believe, I have no way of confirming this, Stanley Kubrick was had a sick sense of humor.
That's true.
From the
Certainly.
he was
had
part of that
yeah.
1950s sick humor.
Sure.
We're going to get into this, the New York Jewish
Yes.
intellectual shtick, that whole kind of Mort Saul, Mad Magazine world that he
Mhm.
lived in, which is most evidenced in Dr. Strangelove. The first shot of this movie is of
It's
a
a
head-
crescent.
it's a head of a penis, and then the sun comes out, and it's a little dot. That is
he's
pre-cum.
referring to this,
Yeah.
to be clear.
Yeah, and then as it moves
now,
on,
and now you can see it.
now
of
it comes
course.
out a little bit more. It's a little bit of, and it's hilarious when you think there's a lot of humor.
Well, look. Let's say the main ship of this movie looks like a sperm.
Sure,
a lot of ships.
There's
are
a lot-
penile
Movie ends
and-
with a
baby.
with a fetus.
With a fetus, there's a lot of
Little-
vulva
in a little
action.
embryo,
There's
yeah.
a lot of vulvas going in and out of
Sure.
when the which
Pod
is-
bay doors.
pod bay
This is why
doors.
this is why we brought Jordan in here. I mean, I will admit.
This is the thing. Okay, so
Yeah.
when March Madness, right? Booking this show has become year over year an increasingly complicated puzzle, right? And there's
heavy as
like,
the head that wears the crown.
I mean, I can't say it, but you can. Okay, because it's like, who are our favorite guests we haven't had on in too long, right? Then it's like, who are people we've been meaning to have on,
Right.
people who've reached out to us. And then sometimes you look at the movies coming up and you're like, who isn't on that list but would be a good guest for that, who we should reach out to or see if they'd be interested or whatever. But usually we do this in secret because we keep private what's upcoming on the schedule.
It's your business. You keep
Absolutely.
it to yourself.
And it gives us a sense of control. But when we do March Madness, our business is public. Everyone knows what's coming up in the fall. And so everyone in our orbit starts to reach out and go, look, I'm just saying, I just want to throw my hat in the ring, this and that.
Right.
So this was a particularly tough miniseries to figure out where to land on everything, because we had a lot of people throwing out, their bids for a lot of different movies.
Kubrick's a big get. It's a
get.
big fish, as you say.
And we just kept on going back to, we had our spreadsheet and like 4 alts for each movie, right? And trying to balance them out and then move some people to different miniseries or whatever. We just kept on going back to, having Jordan on 2001 feels funny. Like, other people were making their arguments for it, but we just kept on going, that feels like that's a funny thing to do. It'll be a funny episode.
Well, the movie begins with Cro-Magnon, early man. And if you've seen my shoulders and back, I am a Semitic man of Russian Ural stock, and I am her sweet, as they say.
Sure.
And I
Is that how you pronounce that?
It's
think you're right.
Cowper's gland with
Cowper's.
Well, that's I hope to bring the heat today.
You're already bringing the heat.
My name's Jordan Hoffman, by the way.
Fuck,
Thank you
goddammit.
so much for having me
job,
on the
Jordan.
show.
He said he was going to do it, and then did you notice I
Yeah.
spent like 5 minutes
You were trying
to
to deflect. I know.
I've
Cut
been
him
a
off.
guest on this show a few
4 times. This is your
This my
4th appearance.
I didn't get a jacket, but I got a what are the pano with cheese bread.
Pandabano.
I got one of those. It was delicious.
Yeah, Colombian
Colombian
pastry,
cheese
bread.
Danish.
And
I'm thrilled to be.
you asked for munchkins. And I got
Yeah.
you one big cheese munchkin, essentially.
Well, because there's a restaurant. There,
I go
Dunkin'
to
Donuts is
Colombian
right
Place
near here.
on the other side. 4 episodes. Blue
Yeah.
Steel.
Love that movie.
That's right.
Melvin and Howard.
That's right.
I really love that movie.
Beowulf.
Beowulf, I guess.
2001.
I am Beowulf.
What a 4-pack.
Yeah, and a lot of times our recurring guests, our friends, our listeners will be like, oh, they always cover movies like this. Here's the theme you can find through the movies they cover. That's a pretty varied 4.
Yeah, there's not a through line with those 4.
there's
really.
not.
I can safely say with Melvin and Howard, it was probably because nobody else wanted to do that one.
I'm sure there were maybe
But
weren't clamoring.
you
but
put your bid down early.
Because I love that movie.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's great.
You
I
did.
think it's
You did.
under discussed.
Beowulf as well. You very early on said,
guess I
like,
sort of
I'm very fascinated by that movie. I have opinions.
and you had mead. You had mead in the.
You had
in the
mead.
fridge.
I brought mead. Oh shit! Yeah.
Mead to the Zoom.
Did you drink any
No,
of the
because
mead?
it was
No, it was
on
on
Zoom.
Zoom.
It was the deep
Oh
pandemic.
shit! That was I had mead over
You-
the
you
Zoom.
drank
yeah.
mead
I
on
drank
mine.
the
We
mead,
watched
yeah,
you drink
yeah,
mead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mead is not that great.
2001.
What a picture!
A Space Odyssey.
It's a
Odyssey.
huge movie.
Yes.
Do you think it is Stanley Kubrick's defining film?
In many ways, I feel like it's this and The Shining.
Yeah.
Right? These are the 2 movies that cast the largest cultural shadows to this day.
It's this. But the only question is this movie almost outside of careers? Certain. It's like, is it cinema's defining movie?
I mean, that's just
I
it.
don't even mean that in a highfalutin way.
But it's almost like a Grand Canyon thing where it's like,
Yeah.
what are you going to say?
Yeah.
A lot of these Kubrick movies, it's very daunting to do an episode on these things.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, what do I have to add to the conversation?
Well, I mean, what's fascinating is you say, like, is it cinema's defining? I think it's safe to say, with the possible exception of something like Tree of Life, this is the most sort of like experimental movie.
Right. It's the most successful
ever have
experimental
played at a wide release.
film. No, far beyond something
but
like The
also
Tree of
to
Life,
have
yeah.
been a financial success.
Yes.
Right. To be
My
a
parents
huge-
saw this when it came out, and they are not psychedelic people.
Exactly.
And I think part of a good way to think about this movie is it's a very bifurcated experience. And I'll be a little bit serious now. Part of what makes the movie so great to some audiences is that it is very hard sci-fi.
Sure.
Diamond hard sci-fi, as they call it, which is an actual term.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're right. Though. You're right.
Extremely hard sci-fi, like him floating around fixing the EPS thingamajig during when he's screwing the bolts and everything, getting the wires out.
And we should spend some time defining the differences.
Sure.
I'm just putting a pin in it for later.
Yeah.
Go on. Yeah.
So on that level, and of course Arthur C. Clarke, a science fiction writer who had a science writing career and is pretty much the man who invented the concept of the communication satellite. I mean, that's a well-known fact. So Arthur C. Clarke is hard sci-fi.
I would call him very hard sci-fi.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then the other flip side of this coin is that this is a very experimental, psychedelic. What does it all mean, man? It's about feelings.
At the end of the day, we're all just like a baby floating in space, man.
Yeah, I mean, there are huge
I'm looking
chunks
at
of the movie.
myself and I'm old, and then I'm
full
the
of
old
stars,
guy.
man. We're
Not
all just monkeys, man.
Non-narrative, just images floating
Bone
around.
was the first tool, man.
Bone was the first tool. That also has a penis thing. There's a whole
There's
a whole thing about penises in this movie, but and then also, like, who is to say that Hal isn't alive?
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Aren't we all
sure.
just computers
Right.
responding to stimuli,
Yeah,
man?
I think therefore I am,
Yeah.
man.
So there's that, and then you fuse it with this like very technical sci-fi at a time, perfect time, 1968. Apollo is right around the corner. It's just like the perfect alignment to achieve escape velocity and become a sensation. Then, like, holy shit, the chairs look really cool. The computer readouts.
Fucking spaceships.
Yeah, the spaceships
space
look
suits.
amazing. The space suits, the IBM ThinkPad existing 25 years in advance. All this cool stuff. It's just a perfect thing that's never been recreated, never been touched again. Obviously, the sequel exists. Clarke wrote 3 sequels, which I have read and would love to talk about.
We know
We're gonna
got
get
it.
into
We
all of
have
this.
to talk about
Yeah,
it. Oh yeah. He
And
got up to 3001, Ben. Did you know that?
No,
That's the last book,
This.
3001.
the Final Odyssey. It's a
Interesting.
hell of a book. And there's also elements of Clarke's earlier work in this movie. And there's also a funny thing. Maybe now's the time to bring it up. Arthur Courageous Clarke. That was his actual middle name.
No,
No, I don't.
was.
I don't.
Check the dossier.
It's Charles.
I'm reading something different here in the
Arthur
dossier.
Charles Courageous Clarke.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
He'd written a lot of short stories, have written a lot of science writing, but his first novel was a book called The Sands of Time. Now dig this. This is really cool. And I only discovered this for the first time a few months ago when I read The Sands of Time. Sands of Time was published in 1950, 51, something like this, but he'd written it a few years earlier. Let's say he wrote it in 48, 47, something like this.
Just to correct you, it's called The Sands of Mars.
Oh, I'm sorry, The Sands of Mars.
It was published in 51, I think.
Published in 51, but it had been lingering
Sands
for a
of
few
Time,
years.
the Jim Henson thing.
I don't know.
I think it is. Look it up.
Sands of Mars is a decent enough book, and it's about
Tale of Sand is what you're thinking.
Weird.
Of. Okay. Anyway, it's
Yeah.
a Mars book.
Mars book. It's set on the first colony on Mars. It's
Yes.
sort of a government-run colony, and the shtick is that the agency that runs the colony wants to send a well-known science fiction writer to the colony to experience life on the colony and write about it. So Arthur C. Clarke is writing ostensibly about himself. The book, they don't give the exact year of when it's set, but if you do the math, it's set around 2009, 2010. Now, here's what's really funny. In the book, the guy that the narrator is a Clarke proxy, is famous because he was a struggling science fiction writer who in the late 1960s, early 1970s, wrote a phenomenal runaway bestseller, much like 2001: A Space Odyssey, which came out in 68, which put him on the map and everybody loved. But the hardcore astronauts think the guy's a fool because Sands of Mars takes place after the year in which this was supposed to take place. So it takes place in 2009, and the book was supposed to take place around 2001, and is like, you got it all wrong. It wasn't like it actually is.
Wow.
And somehow Clarke predicted this in 1950 when he wrote this, that he would write a book that would be a phenomenon, that by the time caught up to it, it would be like, we don't have space stations, actually, blah, 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 blah. So
Remember when he beamed into the Oscars late in life?
Arthur C. Clarke?
Yeah.
No, I don't
Because he
remember
lived
this.
in Sri Lanka, late in life, and he was like into diving.
He was even living in Sri Lanka at the time that Kubrick reached out to him for this movie.
He was, he was gay.
Ceylon at the time.
He was gay and living in England when it was still illegal to be gay.
Mm-hmm.
And he and his lover, who was, I believe, Sri Lankan, moved to Sri Lanka. But he claimed that it was because the telescopes could see stars better.
Sure.
Because they're at the
Sure,
equator.
sure,
I'm
sure.
sure there was a happy
less light
accident.
pollution over there. He just beamed into the Oscars late and very near his death. I think
What
'cause
year
he
was
died in
this?
2008. Huh?
What year was this?
I think it was 2000 or 2001,
Huh.
and he truly looked.
I mean, I hope it
like-
was 2001.
It would that must have been what
It
it was.
must have
It was
been,
the 2000 Oscars in 2000. That's why. And he truly straight up looked like Dr. Evil because
Yeah.
he was wearing
Oh,
like
you know what? I do remember.
he was
this.
wearing like a
Now that you
Nehru
say it-
jacket. You know, he
Yes,
was
yes,
bald,
yes.
and you were just
So
like, "Oh my
cool.
God, it's Dr. Evil."
Because I think I
He
see.
was like, "Hello, it's me, Arthur C. Clarke, in 2001. Oh ho ho ho!" And you were just like, raising your pinky finger.
I think I see 2001 right after that. I see
Ah,
it in the
sure,
year
you had to-
2001. I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
In
Well, I mean,
theaters.
it must. I
Yeah.
mean, it's in a classic movie that you can basically see 2001 in the theater any year you want. It'll always be in a rep
I'll say
theater
this, though.
somewhere.
I have been not able to find a screening these last 3 months. I was just
Yeah.
sort of like, here we go. Summer
That's why I said
2022.
year. I feel like
know,
it'll
I
do
feel
it
like
once
every
a year.
It
at least.
plays fucking
somewhere.
somewhere.
Moving image.
Moving image almost always does the
Yeah.
70
It's
millimeter.
kind of
And I
their
was just
movie,
like,
yeah.
haven't seen it on a big screen in like 21 years. Would love to see it again. Perfect excuse for this podcast.
Yeah.
Summer 2022. Here we go. Let me keep my eyes and ears open for a 2001 screening. I have not been able to
Well,
find
there
one.
was that Nolan release that happened
That's
recently.
the last really major
That
role,
was a
which
biggie.
was that 2019.
It was the Damien
maybe?
Hirst release.
Was so. Is that
We took the print and he put it in a jar full of piss.
right. It was
whatever
it
the
was
50th
demastered.
I would
That
imagine it was
right.
2018 because it was the 50th anniversary.
That makes sense.
I have a fun little story about that.
They,
screening.
they,
I know you do. I
For,
know. We can
for the
talk
listener
about
at
it.
home,
Yeah.
they remastered the movie for what is now the base of the 4K print release digital copy that exists. But then Nolan supervised this IMAX re-release, large format re-release,
It was 2018.
where he, off of the base 4K restoration scanning, demastered it to look the way he remembered seeing it
Yeah.
at his local cinema as a child
Yeah.
when the movie had been playing for like 2 or 3
He didn't
years.
want it to be like perfectly
So
smooth.
it was like
and,
yellowed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting.
And you could see it like in IMAX.
Yeah, and
Like,
people
you
were
know.
just like, why does this look bad on purpose? And they were like, it's how Nolan remembers it. Like Warner Brothers he had such a blank check at
I don't
that
know. I
point.
saw it. I thought it looked pretty cool.
What was it called? Like
It was called-
his memory.
It was called like
It was
2001.
called like the demastered.
It was
screening or
called
something.
demastered.
It was something where I think it was a
Okay.
great op. I mean, I've seen it in 70.
It was
Yeah,
kind of like
multiple times.
it was kind of like listening to, not that vinyl isn't good, but it was kind of like that thing of like, I want to hear all the little
pops and
imperfections and the
cracks.
pops and the right. It was like, rather than a movie that is already regarded as like the coldest,
Right.
most sort of hermetic film ever made, like just being presented in beautiful, clean, 4K. Like,
But it was this funny thing where Leon Vitali, who just passed away, and we'll talk about a lot in the Barry Lyndon episode, they knew that there was like a 4K release coming out on home video and digital after this Nolan branded IMAX re-release.
Yeah.
And they kept on going like, Vitali, is the 4K Blu-ray gonna look like this? And he like couldn't say, good heavens, no, because they didn't want to stomp on the toes of the Nolan thing.
Right,
Like,
right, right,
He had to
yeah.
keep going like, I have overseen what will be on the disc, and I
Yeah.
think people will be happy with that.
They both look good, and
And now in circulation, if they're screening it, it's like the proper version.
you know what's funny is that there's another 70 millimeter floating around that moving image showed, and there was a focus issue with it on night one, which I went, and this was actually kind of cool. The focus issue made itself known at the shot when the monolith first appears,
Sure.
and the apes are going ape, if you will.
Shit.
And so, but what was amazing, and if Eric Hines of the Moving Image is listening right now, he probably remembers there was a little bit of a focus, like a
Yeah.
what do you want to call that? A squirt,
A judder.
a judder,
Sure.
a shutter, right on the monolith.
So it felt like the monolith
It was
like,
so cool to a guy who's seen the
It's
movie a million
wobbling,
times.
right.
It was like the monolith was freaking out, man,
Yeah.
and it was jumping out at me, and I was like getting all weird. And the apes, the monkeys, the Cro-Mags, whatever, are like touching it, and
Moonwatchers.
freaking out.
Yeah.
And the monolith isn't what it's supposed to look like. And I felt, for me personally, that it was the best time I'd seen it in a theater. But the Nolan one, dig this. In New York, they showed it at Village East, which is a great theater.
Yeah.
But in like not the most the neighborhood that's a little bit, East Village. It's not like where it's a real neighborhood where
It's
people
Second
live.
Avenue and 12th Street, and there's this one screen there that is like the one remaining great old sort of movie palace. I mean, it's that in the Paris.
Yeah.
But this, I guess they now call it the Jaffe Art Theater.
Do they give it a name now?
They give it some special name now.
Yeah, well, it
but
used to be a Yiddish theater, and
they-
there's Jewish stars
right,
everywhere.
it's like it
and-
looks like an old opera house.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and they have a 70mm projector there, so they'll do whatever the new big release is that's playing there, but they'll also do a lot of like 70mm screenings, classic movie screenings there.
So dig this. I go, a couple days into the run, I go to the 4 p.m. screening, and as I'm walking in, the guy who's taking the ticket is like, check it out, check it out. I'm like, what? He's like, right there. And I turn around behind me, and I see like the
monolith.
door of the monolith. I see the
Stanley
door of a town car close.
Uh-huh.
And again, this is not like Fifth Avenue. This is like a neighborhood.
Second Avenue and 12th Street.
And it was Steven Spielberg was at the noon screening.
Hey,
That ain't bad.
Yeah.
cool.
And like by himself.
And that's cool because he owns a print of 2001
Yeah.
and he's got a screening room, but he was like, you know what?
I want to see
wanna
Nolan's
see it in
version.
70.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to see the Nolan
on
thing.
Second
Yeah.
Avenue by myself. He
Yeah.
was there alone, the guy said. And he went and bought a ticket, sat for 2 hours and 40 minutes with the intermission. And
Yeah, and then got fucking pierogies at Veselka.
And he probably dropped his bean right when he was supposed to, so the lights could really get
Okay,
him.
I can
okay,
feel
okay,
it.
okay,
I
okay.
can feel it.
This is a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. Sometimes those checks clear, sometimes they bounce. Baby, this is a mini-series on the films of Stanley Kubrick.
Stanley
It's
Man.
called Pod's Widecast.
Sure is.
Today we're talking 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Famous
More
movie.
like 2001: A Good Movie.
Wow.
Mm.
You
Texted that to the
texted that
Doughboys
to the
at
Doughboys.
3 a.m.
You got a haha.
I got a ha.
You got a Weiger haha.
I got a Weiger ha. Ha ha. I won't introduce our guest because he's already done it himself against my wishes. But I want to ask the Bean question because this speaks to why it felt like you were kind of the best guest for this, aside from being like comedic potential. We felt
And
for
you're a
what
great
could be a
film
stodgy
critic.
episode. You've already represented this, but half of this. But you talk about the movie being bifurcated, right?
Yeah.
Between these weird like.
Hard
Opposing
sci-fi and
forces.
psychedelia.
Right.
Yeah.
You're a person who kind of contains those too. I mean, I think of you as a scholar of sci-fi.
I love sci-fi.
but also you're a giant fish head.
I am into fish. Yeah. And fish
and that whole
covers.
scene.
Yeah, but I don't do drugs.
I know you don't do.
Wait,
But-
what?
I don't.
From an expert opinion, for someone who
Yeah.
exists
Wow,
in
Ben,
these
relax.
worlds,
Huh?
is there a moment like is there a sync up moment where you're supposed to drop
I
the
don't-
bean, as it were?
Yes, 100%.
At the beginning of the movie, I don't
No,
know.
but that's
No,
like, where
no.
are you supposed to drop it so that it
I believe the
So
idea.
that
pays
when you
off.
get to the end, like the
Right.
light show really
that's my
hits.
curiosity point is
Yes.
like there must be a moment that has been identified.
I'm assuming
time
you're
out.
like thinking acid.
Yes,
I was
the
thinking jelly beans, but
Right. I believe that the classic thing was like people were going in being like, okay, so you want to do acid
right.
at this moment in the movie, so
Yes.
it's going to really kick in when the light
That's
show starts.
that's why I'm curious. What
And
is
I-
the moment where
I
you,
mean, look,
Maybe the intermission.
it might be the like right after the intermission. It's like because like the light show is what probably like half an hour into the second act
Yeah.
or whatever.
second act is 58 minutes with credits.
Takes
and I
usually
think-
about 30
So my
minutes
guess
to
is it
about
would
an
be like, all
hour.
right,
when you come back from the intermission.
go walk around, lights
makes
go
sense.
down again. That's when you want to
Oh,
be
for
you know,
sure.
yeah.
You gotta burn one down in the intermission.
Yeah.
And the line is, I can feel my brain is my mind is. What's the exact line? My mind is going. I can feel it. I can feel it. And then
Oh, you mean what Hal's saying?
what Hal says.
What Hal
yeah.
says. Yeah.
So fish sober?
Yeah, I know. It's part of what makes me interesting. I
Hey,
suppose.
Do you drink mead?
The truth of the matter is, I don't even drink alcohol
Wow.
at all, and that's not because of any. I just
You're saying for fish or in general?
in general, like I have
Really?
like 2 beers a year now.
So the meat on Beowulf was like
That was a big deal.
Rare,
No,
wow.
I'll have a Heineken.
Sure.
Like
Jordan,
if I'm
you
not-
are high
know.
on life.
Well,
Wow.
You truly are. You
I-
always have been as long as I've known you.
but, yeah,
and you
there's a
just
little-
never felt like
you know, the
and
honestly.
ethnic food.
Say again.
You're high on life and ethnic food. You and I both
yeah,
love.
like, I
you
get
know,
it.
you're
Like,
from
Listen,
Queens.
I
you live
have
in
my
Queens.
vices.
Oh,
No one's doubting that.
but I remember
No, I mean,
you would
the
walk
the
in-
truth.
Yeah,
if
sure.
you want to be, it's just the 3 of us here. Nobody's listening. It's
Producer Ben, please. There are 4 of us.
What 1, 2. I meant the 3.
Oh, the 3.
It's the 4 of us in the
You're
room.
looking
The
at
Three
three men.
Stooges.
I
yeah.
mean, I used to drink like not like two like I never had a problem, but I used to be like a guy. Hey, let's get some beers, man.
Yeah.
Get wasted and drink a bunch of
Sure.
Heinekens.
I can see that.
I just don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I can't say why. Maybe it's because it hurts my tummy the next day and I take a terrible dump. I don't know. But
everyone read Jordan's story about James Cameron making him poop sometime
I do.
if
You know,
wish.
people. You know what's funny? People get hangovers.
Yeah.
I don't get hangovers. I shit for a day and a half after I
Well,
drink.
we are similar in this way.
Yeah, you
Ma-
two
Not
are.
just to the shitting. Pretty much, if I do anything, if there's a strong gust of wind, I'll shit for a day and a half.
So
I
I don't.
remember though, before I even really knew you, but you would come into videology trivia singing.
Singing.
I remember several times you walking into the background videology trivia where we'd all show up early to get a good table.
Yeah.
I remember at least once or twice you walking in like singing. Talk about getting high on life.
Well,
You'd just be like singing to yourself, but not like quietly.
it was probably a really good song that I was listening
Yeah.
to in my head. Yeah, I don't really take drugs. I mean, I in college I did. And well, so I wrote this article. Did you read the article? Do you know that I'm
The Fisher article, or the James Cameron article. We're talking
There was an article I wrote about my relationship with drugs, panic attacks in 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I did freshman year in college take some drugs, and I realized then it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into it too much. You can read
You
the
can read
article.
it on Thrillist, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like part of my relationship with panic attacks had to do with seeing the movie 2001 very, very, very young, because I was into sci-fi and the video box looked awesome. And my mother had seen 2001 when it came out.
Mhm.
And my father got it confused, by the way, with the Raquel Welch 1 Million Years BC.
Sure. Look,
Yeah.
they're both years.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's like, oh yeah, Raquel Welch, she's a doll. And my mother's like, no, you're confusing him. So we rented 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I was like, I wasn't that into it because I was like 8,
Yeah.
and I'm expecting Star Wars, and it's not. But I was watching it because it was still really cool, even on VHS for an 8-year-old. And then it got to the ending, and I had my baby's first panic attack.
Yeah.
You know. And I didn't know why. And my mother was like, my son, why are you freaking out? It's like the guy's in a hotel, you know, like isn't that a nice hotel? Look, he's sitting in bed. He's an old man now. And I just, the ending of this movie, which I think many people find disconcerting in a way that
Yes.
you can't put your finger on. That's why it's such a fascinating ending. It was a touch point of nightmares for me for years.
It makes sense.
And
Yeah.
then
This movie is frightening. It's like deeply
well,
frightening.
the music also that Georgi yeah. So the ending of that movie
Was
was,
that good?
like, some kids are afraid of Jason or
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger. I was terrified of the ending of 2001 for reasons that I didn't know. And the movie was something that wasn't really something you could escape. For example, I'm a little kid and I would watch The Electric Company, I think
Sure.
it was. And they did a parody of 2001: A Space
Yes.
Odyssey. When I was a little older and getting into Monty Python, they did 2001: A Space Odyssey parodies.
History of the World Part 1. I feel
History
like
of the
yes,
World.
Yes.
Sleeper, Woody Allen's Sleeper
Yes.
has, Hal, the voice of Hal is
Yeah.
in Sleeper, and a lot of the look is 2001. So like the movie never left me alone. As I got older and I kind of, it sounds ridiculous to say, but I conquered my fear of Stanley
it doesn't
Kubrick
sound
2001.
ridiculous. Those childhood things
Yeah.
are bigger to surmount than like whatever.
I saw the movie a little older than you. I think I was 12, but like deeply, deeply upset by the ending.
Yeah.
And then I think when
And
it
then you're
got
like,
to the
why?
baby, I was just like, what? Then I was just confused. But I remember the ending really, really unnerving
like
me. And
him
you
being
saying
an old man, like that. The sort of
the entire
lights.
nature of just like at the end of the universe, there is a room and you just age.
Right.
And
right,
the
right.
whole vibe of it, I was just
Hell
like,
yeah.
truly, like, this is my
Yeah.
nightmare.
Rules.
This is the scariest thing to
It was
imagine.
scary. Yeah. It's scarier
Yeah.
than Jason and Freddy for some reason.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, what does it have to do with me being a freshman in college? Yeah, so I did have like a freak out. I'm a freshman in college. Hey,
Yeah.
man, let's smoke a little grass, man. Listen to the Allman Brothers. Hey, that's
Hell
cool.
yeah,
That's what we
dude.
did.
Fuck yeah, man.
You know? Boop, ba-da-doo, boop, boop, ba-doo, ba-doo,
Sure,
boop,
sure.
ba-doo,
I'm sorry. Did
doo,
you go to college in 1968? What's going on?
Hey, man, smoke a little tea.
This is like Jordan in the year 2000. It's like, hey, man. And everyone else is like, I got to get to the Lower East Side. Or whatever.
Hey, man, I went
Kate
to college.
Moss is
I
running
went to
running,
I went to NYU.
Yeah, you
And
went
we'd
to
hang
NYU.
out in Paulette Goddard Hall.
Sure.
But dude, you like the almonds?
Jordan's
dude?
wearing a bandana around his
do.
neck like he's one of Ned Flanders' parents also, as he's miming smoking a Thai stick.
He's a real flat tire, man. I mean, he's taking us on the way to Cubesville.
It's like one beret
Ben loves
short.
Ned's parents so much. It's one of your favorite Simpsons bits.
It's kind of one of the greatest bits in all of comedy.
so funny.
And the fact that they take like 8 seasons before they get to that or whatever it
Did
is.
they ever show up again?
They show up a couple times, but
It's a couple
there's a
times,
long
right.
runway before their first reveal. Like
True.
they're so deep in on the Flanders thing.
So
So you're smoking some grass at
yeah,
NYU.
and you do say there's
some
this new
acid.
thing, man. It's called lysergic
Definitely
diethylic
not a new
acid,
thing.
25.
Sure.
Man, take your bicycle ride, take your magic carpet ride. And I had some good experiences, and I had a particularly bad experience. And
yeah,
that-
bad trips are rough.
the bad experience reminded me of, and then I had my 2000, like for some reason I was like, oh, I'm trapped in the movie.
You're right back
2001.
there. Right.
Yeah.
This is fucked up.
Ben, have you had bad trips on acid and then been like, well, what are you going to do? And just kept rolling with like, because like I feel like if I had a bad trip on acid, I'd be like, all right,
I mean, this
acid's
is
going in the drawer.
The whole
Like,
reason I
yeah.
don't do drugs either is just the panic attack thing of just like
It's kind of.
But you were just kind of like, what are you going to do?
I mean,
you write it out.
you ride it out. I'm a mind warrior, man.
You know,
What can I say?
And there's a new nickname put
There's
on
a
the
thing
list.
in
Update the Reddit.
in the psychedelic community to which I am adjacent to, being a fish fanatic, even though I don't do drugs, about called set and setting, man.
Yeah.
And the problem I now realize with hindsight is that I was with some uncool people.
Yeah.
And the vibes were not right. And there was a guy in the room who,
Yeah, it
who
does make
was a bit of
set and setting. I like that.
was a bit of a prick, and I should not have been in a position of emotional
vulnerability.
around this one guy. He was this British guy, yeah, whatever. Who cares who he was? But he was not a nice person, and it was whatever. So the point is, Stanley Kubrick was a Jew from New York.
Mm-hmm.
From the Bronx.
Arthur C. Clarke was a gay British man.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie is actually very, very funny if you know where to look.
Yeah. Yes. Look, we've been
I don't know why he's clapping.
because he nailed it.
He did
Episode
nail it.
over.
He did nail it.
Thank you all for listening. We've been recording this miniseries wildly out of order. I feel like more out of order than we
Little more out of order
usually
than
do.
not compared to our long ago past where we really didn't give a shit.
No, but more than we have in the last
recently,
couple
we
of
try to be
years.
more chronological. And
Right.
We've been a little out of
So
order.
if the evolution of my Kubrick opinions feels out of whack, out of order in listening to this, it's because it's in the order I'm rewatching these movies.
Sure.
Where I feel like there are certain episodes where I'm saying like, well, obviously Kubrick doesn't have a sense of humor. And that was before I've rewatched some other films and felt this. But now that I fully come around to like, oh, Kubrick was funny. Like he's putting comedy into all of his films.
Yeah.
This is the movie that I had always thought of maybe as being the least funny, not to a fault. But
well, it's the lightest on dialogue, so.
but I
that
do
would,
agree with you that watching it
Oh, yeah,
this
this
time,
movie's a
I
riot.
was
Hal's a
more keyed in. Hal's
a
really funny. Hal's funny.
He's dry, though.
He's
That
like a
guy's
Joe
dry.
Pera. He's like a great deadpan.
Right. Okay, look, I want to. Yeah. When did you? So you're saying you first saw it?
I saw 2001. My mother
12,
took me to
okay.
a re-release.
You
I
saw
saw
it
it
in
in
the
theaters.
theater.
I saw it in
the first
theaters.
time.
I was pretty
Sure.
perplexed. I mean, it was
You
a
were
thing
perplexed,
of
and then
you
it
know.
freaked you out.
My mother is a woman of the arts, you know, and was always trying to expose me to more sophisticated things. And so it was just the thing. You love movies, you love sci-fi, you love Star Wars. You need to see 2001. This is important.
Sure.
It was, you know, I was never kicking and screaming really about going to see a movie, but it was very much a thing that was like, I'm telling you this is important. This is like educational. And I was largely perplexed by it. It was one of those things where I was just kind of like, I
What did
don't.
I just see?
Yeah.
Not like this doesn't make sense to me, but I'm just like, what is the value of this thing? Explain this to me. And it's odd. I don't think I had seen it in full since then.
What?
But it was wildly a movie where I just remembered every line, every shot, every image, every
Yeah.
beat, even though I've only seen it once in theaters 20 plus years ago. And in my mind's eye, I'm just like, well, masterpiece, obviously. Like, it's
Yeah.
one of those movies I never revisited.
It sticks to the ribs. I mean, it really
It sticks
is.
to the ribs,
yeah.
and I was able to totally reevaluate it in my head without rewatching it. And then
Yeah.
watching it this time, I was like, yeah, correct, great, 10 out of 10, masterpiece. But as a kid, I think I was so perplexed. I was a very literal-minded kid. And so I think the last 20, 30 minutes in particular, just like totally, I went like,
Yeah.
you need to explain this to me.
Sure.
And up until then, just the movie is so methodical, so slow, where it's just like, if you've seen Star Wars before you've seen 2001, and I was at maybe at the wrong developmental stage in terms of not quite having the intellect to totally grapple with it yet, I was just like, why is this movie taking 15 minutes to open a door?
See, that's the problem with me as a kid. Like,
Yeah.
I undiagnosed ADD. I was just
hyperactive.
like,
Open the
something's got to happen. Like,
goddamn
my
doors,
dad,
yeah.
I remember him.
Because your dad's a
having
big
these-
sci-fi guy.
He loves
Loves it.
sci-fi.
and he's
like-
kind of a hard sci-fi guy.
Yes, exactly. So this was like a really big moment for us.
Right.
And I don't remember exactly
How
age,
old
8
were
or
you?
7.
Yeah, you're probably a little young. Right.
Yeah, and sits me down, and I couldn't do more than 15, like, or
Yeah.
maybe I made it through the monkey section because the monkey section is kind of
Monkey
fun.
section's
Yeah.
fun.
But
Yeah.
once we get to space, I just remember I was like, I just could not pay attention.
It's
No,
very.
I mean,
it's very.
I
Did you
remember-
watch
yeah.
it like in chunks? Maybe like you would. No,
I was
it
like,
was just like I
I'm
gotta
good.
go.
I'm
Right,
out.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
and then came back to it later.
Well, you
as
know,
a
it's funny.
younger man.
My wife had never seen it, and you know, I had the DVD or maybe even the Blu-ray, and I was like, she's like, you got to watch it, and she had trouble watching it at home, and she did fall asleep, and then I
Yeah.
dragged her to see it at a screening. She's like,
sure.
oh my god, it's
In
so
a theater,
good.
obviously,
She
it's
loves
sort of
it,
a
yeah.
special. Have you ever seen it in a theater, Ben?
Yeah. I saw it at Village East.
Yeah.
not
I mean,
a few years back.
I'll say this too, like, because my memory was as a kid, like, this is taking forever. Like, everything in this movie tapping the watch, right? Even when things were like happening, why is it
Yeah.
all happening so slowly? Rewatching this, I found it a surprisingly brisk watch. I find this movie weirdly kind of like
Totally
it
agree.
moves faster than I remembered it moving. As much as it is very patient and slow and methodical and process driven in every single thing it does,
Yeah.
it didn't feel laborious to
Because
me.
it's always beautiful. Like
And I
even
found
when
it
it's
so
even if it's just
relaxing.
like the pod slowly
Yes.
getting Frank Poole's body,
yeah,
it just is gorgeous to
I
look
found
at.
it so peaceful.
Did you watch
so
it on
relaxing.
HBO Max just the other
I
night?
watched.
or-
I got a 4K Steelbook.
You got the Steelbook. Yeah.
I got a 4K Steelbook. Titans of Colt
Yeah.
UK import.
Well, I
Came with a
watched
patch
it
and a pin.
last night on Home Box Office Maximum, and it looked great.
Yeah.
It does.
It looked great.
I actually peeked on that because I wanted to rewatch a clip and
Hey man,
looks good on
peeked
HBO
it.
Max.
It's truly
It was
an
also
immaculate
4K Steelbook.
restoration without looking like artificially cleaned up.
100%.
Yeah.
I am similar to Ben in that my dad loved this movie more than almost any movie. So when he showed it to me too young,
Yeah.
not that I had a problem with it, but like you, but like he clearly was just kind of like, I don't know, you're probably old enough to handle this. Like he was just desperate to show it to me, and I think I made it at 7 all the way through. I liked Hal. The Hal story was compelling to me.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's like that's something a kid can get. Like the robots turned bad. They have to get and then I think after that my dad was sort of like, okay, the rest is going to be is not going to work for you.
But even-
Which is
I
weird
mean-
because there's nothing scary and
Not,
it's just
not,
it's
not
light.
about scary. I think he
Oh,
just
just
thought I
bored
would
or-
completely
yeah, oh,
zone
okay,
out.
yeah.
Right, yeah.
But-
Or
but-
just not get it.
Yeah.
Which,
Seeing in theaters
Now I
where
get
there
it.
was
I know what's
intermission
going
and we walked out and I had to like check in with my mom afterwards, I was like, so now the plot starts? Like the structure of this movie is so strange, and the placement of the intermission. For the way there's 2.5 hours, which is long, but
Yeah.
usually intermission is like, I mean, this is now the third movie we've covered with an intermission this year,
Sure.
right? And the other two are like 3 hours plus.
Yeah, it's a short movie for an intermission.
It's a
Wait,
short
what's
movie
the
for
other
an
Spartacus and what?
Sweet Charity is an intermission.
Sure does.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
And so does Barry Lyndon. We're getting to that.
Yeah, well that's
We'll
a
get to
long
it.
ass
Yeah.
movie.
right. But the intermission comes at the moment where like the plot kicks into
Kind
gear.
of, yeah.
Like the whole
Yeah.
movie is set up, and then at the end of like 2 hours,
But I
an
think-
hour and a half, the movie says like, and now here's the conflict.
I
Here's
think
like the
it's
real
like finally
tangible-
It's
something
the
is,
best
you know,
intermission break of all.
It's
I
so
love it
the actual
so
cut.
much.
It's
the
the
break.
it's
It's
the
Hal's
moon.
watching. No, it's Hal's
No,
watching
it's
them talk.
the lip sync.
Oh, okay.
They
It's-
have their whole
okay.
conversation, and then they cut to Hal's POV of their lips moving, and, then
it's
it goes
an
to
oh
intermission.
shit. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Bowman says something to the
Incredible.
tune of, I don't think a 9,000 series has ever been dismantled before, and I
Right.
don't know how he'll take it. Cut to Hal's POV, and you realize Hal's watching him. Oh shit! And it's like, oh, a story plot.
There's a
the
concrete-
only little bit of story before that is the with the Russians, the Clavius base. He's lying about that's
Yeah.
the
And the monolith itself, but it's so abstract. Where you're
It's
just
so-
like,
yeah.
I've watched it drive a couple different creatures crazy.
yeah.
and or destroy them, but like
Right, and you can,
Right.
but you're so overwhelmed by the look. Even today, I mean, now you look at it from a retro future point of view.
Yeah.
But to see it in 1968, to see when he's on the moon base, he's making the video call and all that stuff, it's just like so overwhelming to look at. You can understand wanting to keep it plot light because
Absolutely.
it's just all in the imagery and in just the the world building, to use that annoying expression.
I mean, I remember my mom saying to me, like, when I was like, why is this so fucking slow?
Yeah.
As a dumb 12-year-old, right? And she was like, you have to understand, people hadn't seen these things on screen, or they hadn't seen them done this well,
Yeah.
or feel this real and tangible.
Yeah.
So, like, there was a lot of mileage out of just putting this stuff up that was thrilling
Yeah.
to people, right? And also, Star Wars hadn't come out. No sci-fi movie moved fast.
Right. That's true. I mean,
All space was slow, basically, you know? And
Space was slow.
even when you watch films
Yeah.
that are not hard sci-fi,
yeah, like
that are,
Forbidden Planet or something.
right, they are slower moving movies. Like that was the big, in a way, arguably the single most pioneering element of Star Wars was Lucas being like, we can move fucking fast here.
Yeah.
We don't have to, everything in space doesn't have to be sort of floaty,
Yeah.
freeform silence, whatever. But watching it now, I was sort of like expecting to, through the prism, go like, I now understand why this film is so slow because of value it had at the time, how exciting this was to an audience. And now I'm like, no, this is still captivating.
Yeah,
It's I'm
captivating
not
is a really good way.
viewing
of
it from the
putting
mind's eye of what if I was watching this in the 60s.
These days, for me, it's like if a movie looks good, and 2001 is like the best looking movie,
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'll look at this.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
great. I'm not bored.
Every shot is
Warm bath.
gorgeous, and like
Yes.
the influence it's had on design over the years is still being felt. I mean,
Wouldn't it be funny if there was one really bad shot in this movie?
that's
or there's just like
hilarious.
someone with toilet paper on their boobs.
Yeah, exactly. Or Bowman kind of going like, "Ooh."
What one?
That's true. They're
one
really
shot in 2001 was done on an iPhone. Can you guess which one?
Right.
there is one. There is. That's a really good point. There's no clam. There's no wrong note
No.
visually. There's absolutely nothing. And what's famously
He
there-
also makes someone walking through the door. You're like, well, this is
Thrilling.
magisterial. Like,
yeah,
you know,
she's
I have
going
to pay
upside
attention
down
to
to
that. Well,
deliver
when
the
she
Seabrook Farms pureed spinach.
Right.
Sure is.
I love
This
that.
movie has like 15 minutes of Skype, and it's pretty compelling. Like,
I mean, I love that of all the product placement, it's like brands that are IBM
Yeah.
and Pan Am,
Yeah.
big brands, and then Seabrook Farms spinach.
Oh my
Right,
God!
right.
Yes, I know. I wrote down Howard Johnson's.
Yeah, Howard
Yes, Howard
Johnson.
Johnson.
hey, man,
That's
it's
another
hot
one.
stuff back then.
But it is funny, like after this, there's a wave of imitators, right? And they
Oh, for
like
sure.
slow it down, and they're
Yeah.
like really in love with their own effects.
Mm.
And then even post Star Wars, the post Star Wars boom of sci-fi movies from the studios bear more resemblance to this than
Black
to Star
Hole,
Wars.
Star
Black
Trek
Hole,
1,
Alien, Star
Alien.
Trek 1, but the things even like
2069 A Sex Odyssey.
of
Yep,
course.
that huge. It actually is very influenced by this film.
The
People don't
things
mention
leading
that.
up to this, like Silent Running, Capricorn 1, and all these
Mhm.
sorts of things, like they're all slower. And like we talked about Black Hole in a recent episode where I'm like, the look of that movie is incredible. The vibes are amazing. I've never been able to watch it without falling asleep.
It's very boring.
I've never made it to the
the
end.
music's good.
Every time I watch it, I'm like,
At the end, they
this
fall into
thing
the black hole. They're kind of like,
feels so incredible. How is this not viewed as a masterpiece? And then 20 minutes later, you're like, this is why, because I'm asleep. I'm asleep. I'm
Black
dreaming
Hole is
about.
also one of those things where you're like, the vibes, as you say, are immaculate and the design is good. And then there are the two Disney robots with faces. And that's
Bob.
the thing where it's like, that's what I'm saying about 2000. Like, imagine if those
Yeah.
guys were in 2001.
Yeah, no,
Just
it's
like
re-
a floating robot with a face.
But that, like all
Voiced
these
by
other
Slim
things, like you love Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
As do I.
too,
You do
yeah.
as well. I watched it for the first time for this podcast. I enjoyed it a lot.
I recognize it's not for everyone.
The slowness of that film
Yeah.
feels more self-indulgent than this does, and that
Yes.
is 10 years after this,
I-
right? Like
Yeah,
every
I
other
guess
movie
so.
that tries to do this afterwards,
Can't
you're
get it.
like,
can't do it. They
can't
can't,
do
end
it,
No,
and you're
I-
like, this. The images actually hold
I love
you.
the slowness of motion picture.
Yeah,
I do
but
too.
but we're not normal.
Maybe we're not normal, but I also think it's not that movie is profoundly slower. It's that Kirk and Spock are there, and you're kind of like, why aren't Kirk and Spock
Right.
doing anything?
Be
Why are
Kirk,
they just
be
sitting
Spock.
and watching this? Like,
stop looking at
But it
V'ger.
also, and once again, I like the film as well.
all right.
Is a movie where it's like Robert Wise is just kind of like blown away by the effects, right? That's the most expensive movie ever made up until that point in time. And he's just like, we fucking paid for this shit. We should show as much of it as we can.
Rules.
Whereas 2001, there's this bizarre the Kubrick control thing.
Yeah.
Where you're like, what is it about every single image in this movie that just kind of like has you gripped in an uneasy sort of like fascination?
What's also interesting, of course, is that there is another cut that none of us will see. The debut of the premiere of the film, which was in DC, had 11 and a half minutes more or something that Kubrick cut after the first showing.
Yeah.
And there's also a prologue that I believe was shot but then thrown away of all the interview stuff.
Yeah, they tacked it onto Lord of the Rings, actually. Yeah. It was just that.
It's one of the endings.
There's a prologue of where Kubrick interviewed celebrated people in the sciences, including Carl Sagan, who actually hated, who disliked
like
the
this movie.
experience, and
Yeah.
he and Kubrick clashed. But what will life be like in 2001? And then these eggheads said, well, in
To
2001,
try to contextualize the movie as like, this is legit. We talked to real people.
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, well, in 2001, we shall all use computer terminals, and it will be, marvelous for education. And I
Jeez,
think
light my fire. Why don't you?
I
Oh,
think
it's
it was
reputation.
even shot in black and white or something.
Yeah.
There's, of course, the great book for anybody who's interested in 2001. It's one of the great making of books. Is Michael Benson?
Yeah.
George Benson? No, George Benson's
Isn't
the
it
singer.
Michael Benson?
Michael Benson's book on 2001 is
It's called Space Odyssey.
yeah, it's a phenomenal book, and
It's also like it's everything. It's all in there. It's a very definitive.
it's definitive. It's a
chunky
soup
book.
to nuts from the first
Yeah.
meeting of Clarke and Kubrick to the premiere, which Clarke didn't really dig the premiere, and Clarke and Kubrick have clashed over the years, but then both realized that they were good for one another. And of course, Clarke wrote 3 sequels and was involved in 2010 and wrote a really fun book called a 2010 Odyssey File about the making of 2010. And what I love about that, because that book came out like 83 or whenever 2010, the year we made contact, came out, it includes Peter Hyams was the director of 2010, and it includes his correspondence with Hyams, and it was done through electronic mail.
Oh, wow.
And it has,
Wow.
and the first one,
Ding,
so
ding.
the chapter that introduces it is like, first I will explain to you email. You've heard of mail? This is email. And you
And there's
plug
like 5 pages that are just a chain letter.
forward.
Yeah.
So it's cool stuff. It's cool stuff.
That's wild.
Yeah. So, what's your, do you think, Griffin, will artificial intelligence eventually become sentient? Will it have rights? Do you think a robot or a computer system like HAL can become so intelligent that to deny it rights would be wrong, would be immoral?
Well, Griffin?
You're asking a couple different questions here.
Yeah.
I think we will reach a point where that level of intelligence and independent thought, as it were,
Yeah.
maybe even a semblance of feelings are achieved, and it would be immoral to deny
Yeah.
them rights. My question is, do we ever grant them rights?
Ah.
In a time where our government, a large segment of the population, still feels obsessed with denying the rights and existence of many types of human beings.
I understand what you're saying.
I
Yes.
wonder. But it's like, I mean, even just look, the last fucking 6 months, you watch the arc of these AI art generation bots.
Yeah.
It is wild. You watch how quickly they've been like iterating
Yeah.
and how much it's gone from being this weird thing of like, how weird, these robots don't understand the prompts we're giving them. And they're like pulling weird Google images and making these bizarre nightmare images, to now just being like, that looks pretty good.
Exactly. Yeah.
That looks pretty good. It's the ultimate joke of this movie too, which is just Kubrick like recognizing the folly of like, you're really going to create a thing
Yeah.
with the sort of intent of it taking care of us and being able to sort of like oversee us at a level of intelligence, and expect that it won't eventually realize that you are in fact the problem, that you are the
Yeah.
bottleneck, that you are the thing that is preventing perfection,
Well,
that
this-
you
this is
have
one of-
assigned it to identify. you
One
know?
of the great questions of 2001 is what does, first of all, does Hal malfunction, or is he faking it?
Right.
And if he's faking it, why is he faking it?
Because he was maybe programmed to fake it,
But
right?
why would he have been programmed to fake it?
We can get into it.
I want to get into it. I want to
Okay.
open that door. I want to
can open-
rotate.
You wanna
the
open a
pod-
pod
Let me
bay door.
let me just leave that door ajar.
Oh,
Okay.
shit.
Give you a little
Door's open.
let's just roll back slightly
Yeah,
on
yeah.
why this movie was even
Crack
made.
open the dossier.
Post Doctor Strangelove, sci-fi is pretty hot, getting hotter. I
Yeah.
would say as a genre in general.
But it's a lot of like Fantastic Voyage-y sort of
Yeah,
sci-fi.
sure.
Yeah.
Good movie.
Good movie.
It is a good movie.
Fun movie.
And Artie Shaw, who's a jazz musician, you love jazz,
I love it as much as fish.
and a pal of Stan's.
Name of my dead
says-
therapist.
Why don't you read Arthur C. Clarke's books? He's the best one. He's the best sci-fi writer there is. He gives in the book Childhood's End.
Kubrick does this kind of classic thing he's done many times and will continue to do many times after here, where he's like, no one's ever made a good version of this movie.
Right.
I'm
I want to
gonna
make the sci-fi
the
movie.
one
Right.
good one.
And he reads Childhood's End. He likes it. He's like, maybe I'll do this, but someone has the rights. So he's
Mhm.
kind of like, eh. At some point, he sits down with Roger Karras, who's at Columbia at that point, and he's like, I'm kind of looking for a novelist I could collaborate with on a sci-fi movie. And that guy also says, why waste your time? Just do you work with the best, Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah. Stop dicking
But
around.
Kubrick is like, doesn't that guy live in Sri Lanka? Isn't he a wacko? You know,
Uh-huh.
like that is the fear with our, because already then he's already, like you said, he's already gone. And they start writing letters. And as you say, Griff, his letter is, I've wanted to discuss with you the possibility of doing the proverbial really good science fiction movie.
That's the famous line you always hear about his genesis of this movie, where it's like,
what if
this-
it was a good one?
right? Yeah, it's just
Really good.
really good. The
Yeah.
proverbial really good science fiction movie. But I think it's the combination of him being like, no one has done the diamond hard sci-fi film,
Yeah.
the intelligent sci-fi film done at a level and also executed the effects and the aesthetics.
And
At a
he screened every sci-fi movie he could find, and there were some that he liked, that
Mhm.
he admired. He admired the Czech film Icarus XB1, which people have got to see. It's out, Icarus XB1. For a while, it was a hard movie to find. Now the DVD's out there. I think I forget which company put it out, but he never saw a science fiction movie that he thought really clicked.
The combination of getting right the technology, the resources, the ideas, the verisimilitude, he just felt like, yeah, there's a film that no one has made or been able to make.
Yeah. He likes the short story The Sentinel that Clarke wrote. So that's what they're obviously going off of. The book 2001 is written for the movie, basically. I did read it,
They wrote it simultaneously, so
but it's
while-
going off, drafting off of The Sentinel.
Well, the Sentinel sort of had the germ of the idea.
It's got a monolithy thing.
It's got a monolithy thing. I think it was a pyramid in that. So while they're doing pre-production in London, building the moon
Yeah.
landing and all that, Clarke is at the Chelsea Hotel banging away at his keyboard, and he was having his life was an interesting life. And if you read the Benson book, his boyfriend at the time was in Sri Lanka making films of like undersea films or whatever, scuba films, and taking all of Arthur C. Clarke's cash. So Arthur C. Clarke was
Wow.
like a vagabond
Sure.
living at the Chelsea Hotel, writing 2001 at the same time the sets are being built, and they kind of were on the same page, but there are some differences, and
I mean,
they did disagree on some
The details
things.
are complicated, but it was sort of like Kubrick saw this was a guy who had no experience writing in the script format. Kubrick also was kind of agnostic about screenplays,
Yeah.
where he was just like, the ideas are more important.
Yeah.
This format is unimportant. I want to iterate ideas sort of organically until they get to the place I want them to. So he sort of encouraged Clarke to write it in novel form, write it as prose. And then he was sort of like, I can adapt this into a screenplay as you're writing it. There's sort of questions as to whether Kubrick was responsible for any of the prose in the novel and or if Clarke was responsible for any of the actual screenplay. But the two of them were being done in tandem. And this was sort of the root of their rift, was that the movie was kind of held hostage by the book and vice versa, where
It's
like
a weird way to do it.
Kubrick is sort of taking
there's
pieces.
there's very few parallels to the way
Right.
they
He's
wrote
taking
this, yeah.
prose and then going to Trumbull and art directors and people and going like, what can we build around this? And then Clarke is saying like, you need to tell me what you're doing on the movie because I can't release a book that is so different from the film.
Right.
So he's waiting to hear back what Kubrick has done so he can rewrite the book. And there was this fight about when the book could be published in relation to the movie, because also Clarke like needed the fucking money.
Yeah.
He's also sold the this book.
Yeah, well, it actually worked out. Clarke wanted the book to come out first, and I think he should be glad that it didn't, because the movie, of course, is very ambiguous, and everybody's like, "What the fuck did I just see?" And then the book comes out,
And people were like,
and
this.
people went and bought the book in
It
droves.
was the Screen Rant ending explained of its time.
I'm
joking.
Rough, but there is some truth
I'm
to that.
being facetious.
There are some elements of the movie that can leave you scratching your head that are explained in the book.
Yes.
For example,
Yes, the book is a little more straightforward.
For
That
example,
is
like
true.
the room that they're in,
That's
Yeah.
like a human zoo.
yeah, it's a human zoo.
Man.
The aliens created it for him, thinking that it was supposed to be a hotel room. It actually is supposed to be a hotel room.
It's why the ending of AI being considered a Spielberg thing has always amused me so much, because I'm like, the ending of AI is so similar to the
So
ending of
similar.
2001. It's like at the
Yeah.
end, it's the far future, and aliens, or in AI, it's robots, are like, here, we'll make you a.
yeah.
Come on, this isn't like your life. Look, nice room for you to be in.
It's also
Yeah.
the thing I love about both these endings and why I find them so
It's spooky.
unnerving and upsetting is like you have a basically normal looking set that through the context of what you built up in that film feels terrifying.
Yeah.
Like that room on its own is not really scary. In the same
But
way
there's
that the
just something
AI
so incongruous about
bedrooms.
the furniture
Right.
and the floor, and like it's so.
Yeah.
But also just
spooky.
editing, you're like, we've moved past me feeling comfortable seeing a room like this.
Yeah.
That now cutting to this set feels terrifying. AI, you're going back to the same sets you've seen the whole movie in the first act. But now it's just like, why is this happening this far in the future?
It's funny you mentioned the editing, because and we were talking for a while now about how 2001 is kind of slow. There are editing choices in this film that are just so jarring, and there's a couple of them specifically. For example, when they go down on the moon, on Tycho, when they walk down into where the monolith is, it goes handheld, and the movie has been classic Kubrick up to this point. Everything is
Mhm.
locked off, square, very symmetrical, hyper stylized, and then it's documentary style for like 90 seconds, and then that weird sound happens. It's so freaky. It freaks you the hell out because you're not used to it. There's even lens flare while they're walking down the staircase.
It's this wild back pocket thing of Kubrick's past as a documentary
Sure.
filmmaker, photojournalist that he'll whip out as a secret weapon in these very controlled movies.
100%.
And it becomes that much more unnerving where you're like, why is the camera doing this? You've established rules and now you're breaking them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And an hour in. And then also there's like some dissolves, like right before before Beyond the Infinite, when Floyd is talking and then it dissolves. And there's also another dissolve when he comes back in the ship. He's about to
Yes.
kill Hal, and it's a shining shot.
Yeah.
Because you can almost see the axe, he's kind of, his face is right in the camera and the shot from below, and it's handheld again. And then, of course, the craziest use of editing is when Hal kills Poole, the cut,
Yeah.
and on the eye, boom, or whatever it is that Hal can see.
His face.
Those unusual edits are just like, it just grabs you by the
Not to
throat.
mention, I mean, the bone match cut,
Oh yeah, of
which
course.
is like
the famous
so
old
much
bone match
less
cut.
precise than you remember
Yeah,
it
no, it's a
being,
little less
but it's
precise.
so evocative.
And just the switch in sound and the switch in movement
Yeah.
from something uncontrolled, the bone
Yes.
is to this very controlled, and also it's a bone, so Ben's
So here's
excited.
something else that I didn't know until reading the book or
Ben
reading
is
about
grinning
it.
ear to ear.
I'm wearing my Bones hat.
is
You are wearing a bone set.
the maybe you guys put it together, but the cut, for years I thought it was like the bone is a tool, you throw it up in the air, you cut forward in time, and it shows spaceships. Look at what man has achieved. But specifically, those first images you see in space, those are nuclear weapons.
Mm, right.
I never knew this until I read about this kind of recently. And apparently, if you look really close, there are flags on there. There's a Chinese flag, Chinese army flag and stuff. So it's supposed to be like weapons of the past, weapons of the future. And there's supposed to be a ring of nuclear bases, pointing their weapons down at Earth. That's what those first shots are before you see the Pan Am jet going to the space station. And then at the end, when the Star Child comes at the end, you don't see those weapons anymore. And in the book,
Oh, interesting.
In the book,
the Screen Rant
the Star
conclusion,
Child blows it up. Yeah.
the Star Child disarms
They thought
Earth.
of doing that in the movie, and they thought it would be too goofy.
It is a little goofy.
It's a little goofy.
But did you guys catch that those were weapons in orbit? No, I didn't. I never knew that. I watched the movie, 25 years later is when I found this out.
It's because it's not mentioned. I don't know.
It's hard to know.
Because also, how would we know the difference between that and spaceships? They all
Exactly.
kind of look the same.
Exactly. So Kubrick fucked up.
All right. I want to talk about Bones a little bit, but first, you know, okay, he gets whatever. They make this script in this very strange way. They go to MGM. MGM gives them money, $6 million. Hey, that's a decent amount of money to make a movie.
Absolutely. Hefty chunk of change. But
it's going to be called Journey Beyond the Stars.
Not a great title.
It's kind
For
of a
this
boring
film.
title.
It's all right.
They landed on a good title, I would say.
Wasn't there also how the galaxy was one? Was
how,
like
how the solar system was one. I think that was even
sort of half
earlier.
joking. Yeah.
Yeah, they were when they were trying to figure out what it would be about.
Yeah.
It was going to be kind of about this colonization of space or something.
I was surprised though reading the quotes for how deliberate this movie is that everyone was like, he was just kind of making it up as he went along. As much as like part of it is that the book, the source material is being generated in real time as they're prepping the movie. Because there's 22 months in total from when he reaches out to Arthur C. Clarke and is like, what if we tried to write something together to the movie coming out?
Yeah.
And most of that time is production.
Yeah.
So he's really like building it
Well, the script's probably 10 pages long
on its feet. Yeah.
Scene 1, the sun rises. All right,
But,
scene
like,
2, some monkeys bash around.
all
right,
the sort
we're
of
moving
like,
on.
and
above
what's
the line
there's a
people
monolith.
are
What-
like, I'd never worked like this before. We'd come in and be like, I don't know, something like this, and they're like, what's the scene? What's the deadline? When are we shooting this? And he's
Which
like,
is what's
I don't
so
know.
amazing because, and part of what the fascination this film has for me, I mean, I'm a little older and I've been around the movie
Hey.
biz for a while. I know how the sausage is made.
Yeah,
I still believe in my heart of hearts that if I watch 2001 enough times, I will come away with some deep, resonant understanding about the universe.
Yeah.
Like, I believe the secrets of life are locked in this film. I know it sounds really corny and I sound like some of the wackos from Room 237, but if there's ever a movie where I feel like there is the answers to life, the universe, and everything, it's somehow in this film.
I think this
And-
movie is also the reason why Kubrick has that weird
Sure.
mythology, godlike sort of. I mean, I don't think people would invest as much into The Shining if this movie didn't exist.
100%.
Because it does feel like this is a movie made by someone who knows everything and isn't telling us.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the more you read about the production, it was like a little bit of like just chaos.
It's like one of the
You know?
fucking modern Mission Impossible movies, like where McQuarrie is like, I don't know, give me like 4 locations and we'll
but-
write scenes on the day.
100%, because like when they're shooting, Kubrick's like, what if they went to Saturn instead of Jupiter? And they're like, Saturn? That's
What the
just got
fuck are you
rings.
talking about?
We're gonna have to paint the rings. What are
Right.
we gonna do? And Kubrick's like, I don't know, give it a shot. And like, it's a total disaster, and they have to switch back to Jupiter and all that.
Yeah.
Like,
You know, for a guy whose movies are so precise, he was a bit of a mess. I mean, originally when they were working on the script, they would work in his apartment in Manhattan. And in the Michael Benson book, they talk about how Clarke couldn't handle it because his kids were running around. There was he was a big, loud, gregarious New York Jew. People think of Kubrick as being British because he lived in English his whole life,
Right.
but he talked like this. He was like, I don't know,
It's
make
so
it.
funny
give
when
me
you
some
watch the
Saturn,
interviews
you
with
know.
him and he's like, I don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
he's a wonderful puzzle and enigma.
There's a quote from one of his daughters in the dossier about how he'd always throw these dinner parties for his cast and crew. That was like his way of understanding how to reach out to people and connect to them, because he was by all accounts not a very conventionally social guy, and that he liked being a host and everything, but they weren't these like sort of lavish like Wes Anderson eating at the finest restaurant dinner parties. His daughter was like, I think my father always had this secret dream of being like a short order cook. And you hear about these dinner parties and they sound like the fucking rats working in the kitchen in Muppets Take Manhattan. Like he liked the chaos of like flipping 6 things over and the kids running around and yelling and all
That's
that sort of
awesome.
shit, and like, and then hosting everyone that way. They also said he would like go to sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, wake up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like
Wow.
all
Yeah.
this sort of meticulous, refined warlock sort of shit is just like, yeah, it does seem like
All
he
right.
was.
I thought what you said was wrong, and okay. So production kicks off 21 months after production starts. 21 months after he starts working on the script.
Sorry.
And it was budgeted for 5, but it cost 12.
Yes.
So it went way over budget. The production was massive. cameras would be shooting on what's described as a 24-hour shift. So I guess people are like coming in and out to operate the cameras. Like I said, there's like 200 special effects, which is completely unheard of for a movie in 1968. So they have to figure out every single step of that in advance. But then Kubrick is throwing things at them to change it. It is crazy. Like, it's just what you guys were saying. It's just crazy that this movie, which feels so tightly controlled, was not. But they're kind of inventing everything when they make this movie, right? They're inventing special effects.
Certainly in terms of process and everything.
I think it's important to remember, like, there are shots in this movie that you don't even think about that are just like of screens of just like digital, like, just like those are not computer generated images. Those are all hand painted or hand created because it didn't exist back then. The technology now, like even in like Star Trek 2, those images are all hand done.
What's the movie? Is it Coma is the one that has the CGI hand on a screen? That's the first CGI in a movie
that sounds
ever.
Right. Coma as the first CGI movie sounds like some trivia fact.
Really?
It's
the
like
Michael Douglas
Catmull scanned his hand and made it into a wireframe image. And like someone bought it for like $25,000, and that's the first CGI image.
Oh.
And like then Star Wars has the one screen where like General Dodonna is showing the wireframe.
Right.
But it's like that's 10 years away being able to even do that. As you said, every time there's like what looks like a computer generated wireframe image in this movie, it is a painted thing.
Yeah, and there are a lot of them.
A lot of them.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's like it's like traditional animation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just to think about the first shot on the Discovery, it's of Poole going sideways, going around the perimeter, the equator of the screen, if you will, taking a jog with the camera locked down inside. I don't think there'd ever been a shot like that. And the reason why it's held for so long is because audience members would just be like gasping, like, what am I seeing? How are they doing this?
Like, I mean, it's trite to say it, millions, but like it looks good now. Like, there's trite card. Like there's nothing improvable about it.
No, even watching it today, I'm like, I don't know if there's a movie a sci-fi movie that looks more real to me than this.
Yeah.
And I can read about and watch and study all the process things and hear the explanation of how it was done. But when I'm watching it, I'm like, this just feels like it was really shot in space. I understand what the tricks are more so than any other.
Right, but it still looks like they were in space.
It just looks, the answer is they went to space.
Man, the design aesthetic, like the VFX, or I guess I'm calling them VFX, they're painted,
VFX,
but whatever. But like even the font, it still looks so like not even contemporary, ahead of its time.
What if the font was Comic Sans, would this movie not even have a legacy?
It would take me out a little bit.
The font really is, I mean, on the zero gravity toilet shot, I mean,
I think Hal's malfunctioning. Why do you say that? He's speaking in wingdings.
That would be good. That'd be good.
It's funny that we're talking about this
black
movie.
Square, triangle, bird. I don't know. What is some wingding?
Airplane.
Yeah. We talk about hard sci-fi. There is America was not ready for the zero gravity toilet, but Kubrick gave it to them anyhow.
Kubrick gave it to them.
Now here's a question about
that. Also feels like that's a little like there's a little sly humor in that.
A little wink.
Oh, for sure.
I mean,
but it's also
fairly provocative to put a
if an
toilet in a
astronaut
movie.
like goes and talks to a high school, what's the first
Oh my
question?
God! How do you
From
be
a
in
student?
space?
How do you go to the bathroom in space?
How do you make?
Hey,
Yeah.
Yeah, because I want to know, how does it work?
It's like a suction device because you got gravity.
Okay, so here's part of my thing.
Gravity's
It's like
your
in
issue.
the instructions, right? It's like number 5, hold on to your nuts. Do you know what I mean? Because
it's gonna be like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, you've seen For All Mankind, right? I'm obsessed with For All
Wonderful
Mankind.
show.
Great
So
show.
good.
I think you'd like
Oh,
it.
the show. I've not seen the show.
The movie's obviously the
movie's good
classic
too.
documentary is a
Different,
masterpiece, but and that has a thing, not to spoil, but it's early in For All Mankind. Part of the, the idea is, what if the Russians won the space race and we stayed in it, right?
Yeah.
Or the Russians beat us to the moon, and so the space race continued. And one of the early things that happens is they're like, okay, well, let's get a woman on the moon. Like, we'll just try and beat them anywhere we can. And they're getting a woman in there into one of the Apollos, and then they're like, shit, she's gonna have to pee. We didn't think of this.
Yeah.
Like, because we haven't invented that yet. Like.
Yeah. Cool.
And it's a whole storyline.
Cool.
Anyway, stuff
I
like
like
that
it.
happens.
It's a great show.
Yeah.
Anyway, zero gravity toilets. Look, a big thing that's interesting about 2001,
Yeah.
and I think you'll all agree,
Uh-huh.
is for a movie to have this kind of a budget. Kubrick is a big director. it has no stars.
No stars.
No, barely identifiable actors.
We'd say it has a galaxy of stars.
Well, that's true. It's full of stars. But like he's not hitching an actor
coming off
onto
of
this.
David and Lisa,
Correct.
which was sort of an early American indie breakout.
Yeah.
But it's maybe equivalent to like if Christopher Nolan cast like the other guy from Primer as
Right.
Batman.
Exactly. Right. And like obviously this is not an actor's picture. Like
Yes.
it's not like there are roles for actors that are absolutely outrageously juicy.
Sure.
But you would think like, okay, I'll help the studio out. We'll get a name
Especially
in as
what's
Bowman.
Haywood, the sort of early fake out lead, the sort
Haywood
of
Floyd. Yeah, the guy who plays Floyd. I don't even know.
His name
that.
is William Sylvester.
obviously
He's best known for his role as Dr. Haywood Floyd,
Okay.
2001:
I mean,
A
that's the thing,
Space
all
Odyssey.
three of these
Gary
guys
Lockwood,
are like,
though, who plays Bowman, he's
No,
very
he plays
good.
Poole. He's Poole.
he's Poole.
Keir
Bowman is
Duella
Keir Duella.
Sure.
is,
All right.
is Bowman.
I
Yeah.
apologize.
Yeah, Gary. Well, you like Gary Lockwood because he's in
Star Trek.
But it has had a great kind of journeyman actor
Yeah,
career.
they
all
both were
different
good,
stripes.
but actually, you're right. Keir Dullea is really damn good in this.
he's
His
phenomenal.
scene work, if you will, with Hal.
They're both. I think everyone's really good.
You
Yeah.
can't read what he's
No beef with
thinking.
them.
He's like,
no.
and that scene. They're really the only real scene in the movie as a traditional like acting moment is when Hal is slyly doing the psychological test on him and they're playing games a little bit. You can't read his face. And then Hal has his moment of does he have a malfunction? He goes, just a moment.
Yeah.
Which is so scary. And that's a key thing. Like what really is going on there?
Keir Dullea, breaks down David and Lisa, which is this like small sort of like searing relationship
Keir Dullea.
trauma.
Set in a funny farm, if I may use that expression.
Yeah, it was almost like
Is that a politically insensitive term now? Funny
I
farm?
don't know. But it's like almost like a mumblecore movie of its time. It's sort of a post Cassavetes kind of like, oh, this is raw, this is real people communicating with each other kind of thing, tonally. To put him in this is odd. He's mostly a theater actor. He does a run of movies after this, but then like pretty much by the 70s, he's like, I don't like movies. I'm going back to theater. And he like does 2010.
He is in 2010.
He'll occasionally
Not in a
pop up
big
in
role, but-
something, but he's basically like, I went back to theater. That's what I like. I don't really like film acting. This is such a film acting performance.
Yeah, it's
like
true.
this.
Well,
This
maybe he
performance-
really got his rocks off here,
Maybe.
and that was that. Yeah,
it's sort of surprising because it's like not only does he have so little dialogue, but it's mostly like close-ups being held for 2 minutes that are just watching this guy think in stillness.
Right.
It is like such a sort of technical performance.
Yeah.
And as you said, he's mostly acting off of nothing.
Yeah.
It's bizarre, but he's phenomenal in it. I just think, it's what you said, David. Like you're surprised that they almost didn't make him go like, have George C. Scott play Haywood.
Right.
Like,
Can we
even
just
if you
get
want
a
the
name
unknown
there?
guy,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
This is
for the fake out lead, the elder statesman at the beginning, get someone who's fucking been nominated for an Oscar.
This is a fun little tidbit here. Kubrick would throw a lot of dinners. Obviously, this movie shot in England. Classic Kubrick convincing the studio to let him, essentially.
I've been location scouting, and I think the English countryside is the only thing that looks like space.
You're right. Exactly. It's the only thing that looks like the dawn of man. He would have these big dinner parties where he's like, here, Gary Lockwood, come over. And there'd be like art historians and intellectuals and authors and all that. And he did American food that Europeans found astonishing, like hamburgers. I think in the 60s, you could still blow like a French guy's mind with a hamburger. Like,
Have you heard of a hamburger?
I eat it with my hand.
Stanley's over from America.
Uh,
He made us
and-
a hamburger.
And listen
I
to
believe
this.
he put a pickle on it.
A hamburger sandwich.
A nickname for me, I think. Later on, Christian Kubrick says he was the king of sandwiches. Like
you want to
that.
call yourself the king of sandwiches?
I do.
Have you had one of Stanley's sandwiches?
You're right.
He puts a pickle on it.
Do you call it a hamburger sandwich? That feels like a Hoffmanism.
Maybe you've overheard me say it because I always call them hamburger sandwiches.
I just think that's always funny
I
to
always
call it a
them-
hamburger sandwich.
Yeah, my wife
It
does
is
too.
funny.
We call them hamburger sandwiches.
Yeah.
Impossible hamburger sandwiches.
Can I get an impossible hamburger sandwich?
Yeah.
Douglas Rain, of course, the voice of Hal.
Uh-huh.
Probably the most crucial piece of casting in this movie.
So good.
Yeah.
Had apparently done a voice or had been in a short film called Universe.
Yeah.
And I've never seen that, but that was what
Moving
Kubrick
Image
wanted
showed
him.
it during some
What's
of their,
it like?
It's awesome.
I mean, it sounds pretty good.
It's shots
It's
of
got
like
the universe
Awesome.
in it?
Sounds good.
It's great footage of like and the Milky Way spiral. That's my Douglas Rain. The Milky Way spiral. I can't do Douglas Rain,
Yeah.
but it's about the Milky Way spirals.
The Milky Way spiral.
Yeah,
I
it's
can't really.
great.
Yeah, I mean, who could?
It was
you know.
Canadian television.
You know, my name is David,
Yeah.
I have heard this. Yeah.
and so I would get a lot of that.
I
David.
can't
That
do
was a
that
classic.
for you,
I can't do
Dave.
that for you.
Well,
Dave.
so
Yeah,
Howard
there's a little
Stern,
bit you could do.
if
with
I
me.
may bring him up,
Sure.
had it
He's
once
in this one, right?
told the story
Yeah.
He was the monolith.
about how he went and saw
Fucking
2001
hell, this guy's fucked up.
and he saw it with his friend Dave.
You a fucking freak out?
And
Okay.
Dave
You got a big cock?
took drugs, took
Sure.
hallucinogens. And when the movie starts talking to Dave, my mind is going Dave. His buddy Dave flipped out and had to leave the theater. And there's also a story which I it might be apocryphal, I don't know, but it's sourced on the internet. There was a screening of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and at the end, somebody took drugs, man. And at the end, when it got really heavy, somebody in the audience started screaming, and he's saying, "It's God! It's God! It's God!" and ran into the screen.
That
broke the
rules.
screen.
Wow.
That's
You
fun.
can Google that story.
The
It's somewhere
rare
out there. It's
reverse
sourced.
Sweetums.
It's just funny because
You're
of course you think of the like, you know, the way they'd market horror movies. Like people are fainting. We have a doctor, you
Yeah.
know. And then 2001, it's like people are just. It's getting too heady for
Yeah.
them.
They're
It's
running into the
this
screen.
G-rated movie.
Well, you know what's? I mean, this. Maybe you were gonna get, but Kubrick was not into
No,
psychedelics.
I'll read the quote.
Yeah.
I believe that drugs are basically of more use to the audience than to the artist, he says.
Yeah.
LSD. Because, of course, you make a movie like this, you are going to get a lot of like, man, were you so baked when
How
you
do
did this,
fuck
man?
come up with that?
What were you right? What were you taking when you wrote this, man?
I wrote that down.
You wrote that
I
down?
said Stanley took acid? Question
Question
mark.
Nope.
Now I
He
know.
claims, well, at least he certainly claims not his thing. I don't know if he's saying I never
I don't know. He
inhaled.
could have stand to fucking chill out every once in a while.
The hell,
I think
the hell
this-
thing.
I
can
went before I just think this is interesting. I think that the illusion of oneness with the universe and absorption with the significance of every object in your environment and the pervasive aura of peace and contentment is not the ideal state for an artist. So he's almost saying like, I don't want to chill out, man.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you know, I feel like
That's an amazing quote. I
Love
never
well,
heard that.
the guy gives good quotes
It's
if
gives
you
great
sit him
line.
down.
Yeah, it's
So
a shame
yeah,
he stopped doing
he
interviews.
was not really into the get weight, but the
The way he
marketing
puts his
department.
is like the way I can see it. My friends who use LSD, they're not like transfixed by great art. They're transfixed by like a table leg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's like I don't need that in my.
Yeah, I got other things to think about.
And my
but-
shoelace, man.
no, but this is a good point. You're,
But
you're trying to make. Yeah.
the movie was not a smash hit from day one, and then the hippies found it,
Right.
And
it
they
ran a long time.
and then
It was just like immediately claimed.
yeah, it was,
Yeah.
and so the marketing department realized that the long hairs were seeing it, and there actually was like there was a special screening at like the early computer geeks at MIT and at what's called the Sale on the West Coast. They were getting into it and they were getting high and watching it. So one of the
Hell yeah.
one of the I believe it might have been as square a publication as Christian Science Monitor, in their review of the movie referred to it as the ultimate trip, but didn't mean it in a psychedelic way, meant it in like, strap on your space boots, comrades, we're going to take the ultimate trip, and so the marketing
A
department,
fun family thrill ride.
yeah,
Yeah.
plucked that line and called it the ultimate trip,
And
and
it
then the
just-
solarized
right.
image of the eyeball and the poster.
It like made that movie's box office. Yeah.
That's so do you know what he's talking about? I'll find it for you. Because obviously the classic poster, you've got the the space station or whatever, but then there's
the eyeball.
oh yeah, hell yeah.
So you see that in
Wow.
1968 when you're walking around, you're listening to remember the Allman Brothers we talked
and
about?
there's a
them earlier?
baby inside
Shoop,
the eye.
The hell thing, which I feel like Nolan is like one of the first people to be like, yeah, we should follow this with TARS. But just the fact that he just sounds like a guy, that they don't do anything to make him sound like
Right,
a rubbit.
he's not bleepy or
And also, they don't put any
modulated.
effects on him to make him sound like it's coming out of a speaker.
Right.
It's that
Yeah.
thing that is so
It's
bracing in Interstellar.
unsettling. Well,
and it's bracing in this where you're
Yeah.
just like, that. No, the voice, there should be a little more distance from this.
obviously Interstellar, which is a supreme masterpiece
I
and
love
also contains a sequence where someone goes into a crazy thing and then a bunch of crazy
Right.
stuff happens. But yeah, TARS is almost like offhand.
It's a guy in the room.
At least Hal has this sort of like whispered, hushed kind of monotonal
the voice of a documentary narrator.
Yeah, from Canada, flat voice.
And that's sort of the authority of the Interstellar.
Tar sounds like he's straight. He's like, I don't know, man. Like he sort of sounds like that sometimes.
I don't know. Get out of here.
Yeah, Tars is almost too wacky. But
no, I know he's not too wacky. He's a good
it's
boy,
wonderful,
and we love
Tars
him.
hasn't worked in a while. It's weird.
Well, because Tar came in and market corrected him. You know?
I know. David.
Yep.
You like gambling.
I do. I love to roll the dice.
In most areas of your life, but there's one I think you don't.
What?
When you're picking what entertainment to watch. And I found that watching Netflix without using ExpressVPN is like going to a casino and only being able to play on the slot machines.
Which in a casino you actually probably would prefer.
That's, well, the other stuff, who needs it?
Right.
But the point is, no, but we all want choice.
Yeah, except you're just kind of like, this game of craps is not being brought to me by Ghostbusters, so why would I play it? Like, that's your take on
Here's
being
the
in a
thing.
casino.
I think like I would play blackjack more if they let me bring my own small soldiers deck.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If they were like branded, if the cards had the characters on them, absolutely. But this is the point. I want that choice. I want the ability to see my favorite characters in media while spending real money.
Yes.
We don't want to limit ourselves.
If you
the
have
big money somewhere else.
If you have a VPN
Yes.
from our friends at ExpressVPN, you can change your online location so you can control where you want Netflix or any other streaming website to think you're located.
This is important, especially if you're someone who watches along with us on this podcast. Certain movies at certain times are only available on certain services in certain countries.
And this is interesting. I'm looking at like, so say oh wow, so they have a chart here where it's like the differences between, say, Netflix in the US and Netflix in the UK.
Sure. How do you know that?
Well, I've got a chart, and some of the things you could watch on the in the UK, if you have UK Netflix, Police Academy 5, Assignment Miami Beach.
Thank God.
Okay. Catch Me If You Can. Apparently, these are only on UK Netflix.
I mean, here's a big one I always throw out.
One Piece seasons 11 to 37.
Gotta go.
Those specific seasons.
But this is the point. This is why you need a VPN. You might need to jump to a different country to watch seasons 1 through 10.
You might need to. Yeah, you might have to shift over to Portugal or something. Who
David,
knows?
I always cite it as one of my ultimate examples. Here in the States.
To be clear, I'm not sure what happens if you shift over to Portugal.
Who knows?
Yes, here in the States.
Here in the States, the Trip franchise for us is a series of concise films. Coogan and Bryden.
Yeah, but in the UK, they're television shows.
Every one of what we consider a movie is, in fact, a cut-down version of a season of television, and they have never been streaming legally anywhere in the United States. But they are on UK Netflix.
Yeah, Taskmaster, my favorite show.
Your favorite show.
I'm trying to figure out how to watch the new season of that. Look.
Here's how. ExpressVPN.
You open the app.
Yep.
You select a country's name.
Easy.
You tap one button to connect.
Bing.
When you refresh the page, you're there. Look.
Blazing fast speeds, stream in HD with zero buffering. It's compatible with all your devices, phones, laptops, media consoles, smart TVs, and more. They got servers in 94 different countries. It works with other streaming services, BBC, iPlayer, YouTube, more.
Yeah, so be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/check. Don't forget to use my link.
It's my link too. It's our link.
Our link at expressvpn.com/check to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free.
Hal, the computer, is an icon that even if you've never seen the movie, you know it. It's like Buster Keaton's face. You know, it's like famous.
And not only that, the Hal voice, like the idea of Hal being parodied.
Yeah, you could put him in a Pizza Hut commercial tomorrow. Everyone would get it.
Even if you haven't seen the movie.
There's definitely been a million of those fucking
Macintosh
things.
computers did it. Anyway, the point I'm making is the first shot of Hal is out of context. It's just like, you know, Bowman is doing their exercises, and then they cut to just a close-up of Hal. And if it's the first time you're watching the movie and you don't know about Hal, hasn't been established. It's just like a rainbow of colors. You're like, what the F is this? Like, what is this thing? And you don't know until a good 15 minutes later when the BBC interview is happening and they do the backstory. So I would love to have known what a person watching this for the first time would think. Like, why am I seeing a rainbow of colors right now? You know, it's so jarring.
Yeah. Also, if you're seeing this in the 60s where this is not even like really established as a sci-fi trope, you know?
Right, yeah.
Like I took my sister to see The Matrix when it was sort of playing in theaters again before Resurrections came out, and she had not seen it. She's a youngin who was born in 1998, so she's pretty much only lived in a post-Matrix world. And it's not like Matrix created the idea of us living in a simulation, but it certainly like popularized it,
Sure.
pushed it into the mainstream. And I was just sort of trying to explain to her, like, when that drops in this movie, people lost their fucking minds.
Yeah.
Whereas she turned to me and she was like, oh, so it's one of these, like, whole world's a simulation movies. And I was like, it's not one of those. It's the one where you're just like, sort of the idea of the evil AI
Yeah.
is a thing that is so omnipresent now. But at this point in time, probably when they cut to the screen, you're like, what are you're telling me that voice comes from that?
Yeah.
This thing is thinking?
What if Hal had a big boxing glove near his processing core and he could punch you away?
I wish
Because he's easy to get once they get in there.
He should have all the Simpsons, Stephen Hawking, like
right.
little rockets, and
right,
the
a
boxing
buzzsaw
glove,
maybe,
propellers.
something like
Or if he had a little drone helper, that could be like its physical presence.
Yeah, or what the Great Gazoo could swoop in, maybe.
This movie is weirdly lacking Gazoo.
Yeah, this movie doesn't have any Gazoo figures. Well, we haven't really talked about the opening sequence of the film, which is set during the dawn of man.
This is another stunning thing about this movie, and I feel like whenever Alex Ross Perry is on this show, and we'll be on again soon, winky winky, I feel like he'll spotlight movies where he's just like, this movie has like 5 scenes, like 5 things happen.
Yeah,
but this is truly a movie where like 5 things happen.
Yeah, it's a very light on stuff.
Yeah,
in a way.
there's like a lot of buildup and like deliberation for each sequence, but it's like basically 5 acts, and each one is based around like one thing happening. So the opening act is the Moon Watchers, right?
Yep.
The landing of the monolith.
Yep.
This generation of apes.
Yeah,
the
they use
discovery of the
tools.
bone,
They
the
use
first
tools.
tool,
Yeah.
and sort of the first act of cruelty.
The first act of they take a tool, and the first thing they do with it is show dominance over another group.
Don't they whack something? Whack some bones
They
first.
hit the beasts. They start killing beasts.
You don't see it, but he has the thought of it, and then you see them eating raw warthog or whatever.
Basically,
so it's implied they use it for food.
No.
Technology immediately leads to violence.
Well, it leads
Pretty
to
quickly.
sustenance.
Yeah.
I mean, warthogs.
I just think
Cro-Mag's got to eat.
Tree of Life, as you've called out, is a movie that's very much in conversation with this film. And when that film does its 2001 sequence where you have the 2 raptors, Malick always described that as like the first act of kindness or the first act of mercy. Like he's almost doing the exact opposite, where that sequence is like, for no good reason, a raptor chooses not to kill the other raptor when it could. So I always think of this movie as like, this is like the first act.
It's a little bit brutal. I mean, it's a little bit like this is. Look. I mean, mankind. We still got to get our act together.
Here's this
man.
new tool. What
Come on,
damage can I
people
do?
now.
It's
Smile on your brother.
revenge.
It's revenge.
It is revenge, though, because they're
fighting over
the other group is the first aggressor. They chase the apes out from the watering hole.
Yeah.
And then when they figure out to have this tool, they get their revenge.
I love how unreal these apes look.
They look
They're
great, but they
funny.
don't look great.
They're funny.
But I
They
love
jump
that about
around.
them. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, I think
jump around.
if technology was better, if they looked more realistic, I don't know if the sequence would have as much.
I agree.
Power.
They need to be kind of alien. They need to not be
That's the thing.
exactly one
Right.
thing or the other.
And when you see the jaguar with its rods and cones reflecting, that's a real jaguar. So
I know,
it
and you're
looks-
like, wait, that's a guy in a suit. They just threw a jaguar at him.
Can I?
Stanley's like, here's my jaguar. Man.
I want to
Doesn't talk like that.
This is one of my favorite little observations about 2001: A Space Odyssey, motion picture that came out in 1968, Stanley Kubrick. Ben just alluded to the moment where the act of violence happens. It happens at a watering hole. Literally, it's a pond with pond scum and muddy water, but it's a good old-fashioned watering hole, and it's 2 tribes going head-to-head, and one shows dominance over the other. Movie set in 2001, of course, shot during the Cold War, 1968. And the next scene in the movie in which characters interact in a substantial manner is on the space station in between the Earth and the Moon. Dr. Haywood Floyd checks in, shows his passport, goes to make a phone call, talks to the little girl played by Christiane Kubrick, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he sits down with the Russians. And where are they? They're around like a circle. and they're have drinks.
Mm.
They're at a watering hole. Oh
There you
fuck, man! Shoop, ba-doo-ba-doo-boo, pass that bong.
Why are the Allman Brothers band here all of a sudden? Wait a second.
2001.
They're trying to
blow my
dock.
mind. Shoop,
Just like
ba-doo-ba-doo-boo-ba-doo.
on a groovy ship.
So think about
It's
it.
going like this. Yep.
It's we're apes, man, showing dominance. The Russians, the Americans, Cold War.
I kind of was thinking how the spacesuits make people look like monkeys.
Just a little bit, sure.
So I had a similar kind of like,
yeah.
And if you're on like the
man,
moon
wait.
surface, you're kind of
You're kinda like
walking funny.
yeah,
Just
Yeah.
the,
silly
line,
monkey.
the cut from the bone to the space weapon. It's
Oh,
just
but
like-
that's too obvious.
Well, yeah,
Griffin.
but
I
this
like my
whole-
watering hole analogy much better.
the Kubrick thing of like we evolved to a
Yeah.
point where we think we've evolved.
Exactly.
But it's the same shit over and over again, just dressed up in different ways, different technology surrounding us.
Same shit, better food.
We're the,
Raw warthog,
stupid
or
mammals.
the spinach.
We have the same instincts that are driving everything.
Do you guys want to know the plot of the third 2001 book? Because it's so cool.
2061, correct? Odyssey 3.
I think it's 2061. 2010, the book is similar to what you see in the movie.
Yep. It's
With
all
the
about
ex-
nukes.
Yeah, more about nukes, Cold War. The movie's good. I think the movie.
We're gonna talk
We're
about
gonna,
the movie.
I haven't seen it yet.
Well,
we
but
were
in the-
watching it for
in the
Patreon.
book, there's extra shit. David Bowman's ghost goes to visit his parents in like Idaho or something.
Right.
It's amazing.
Because Bowman and Poole are both in it, right?
2010, the movie? No, just Bowman.
Bowman is in it. I
Okay,
don't
why do I
know
think
about-
Lockwood's in the movie as well?
Maybe he is. I don't know. I have
It's
seen
just
it.
Keir Delea.
Okay.
So Bowman is in the movie, the spirit of him, and in the book, he's like hanging out with his parents.
No
It's
Lockwood.
hilarious. So 2061, Floyd is back, and basically the basic premise is there. And this is kind of a sci-fi trope, particularly with Clarke. The big dumb object.
Mm-hmm.
A Rendezvous with Rama, which is one of Arthur C. Clarke's best books, is a big thing in the sky. Let's go up and look at it and find out what it is.
Right,
That's
which
the whole book.
Fincher tried to make for like 20 years.
Yeah,
Was his dream project.
and Morgan
yeah.
Freeman also had the rights
Yes,
for a long time.
right. Freeman had the rights, got Fincher involved. Yeah.
So you mentioned before this movie has like 5 scenes. Rendezvous with Rama has 1 scene.
yeah.
Let's go up, see the thing, find out what it is. The end. But it's wonderful. 2061 is another big dumb object, and they go up there, and then there's a discovery on Ganymede, which is one of the moons of Saturn or
Mhm.
Jupiter.
It's
And-
not Ben's favorite, but you're a Europa guy.
Yeah, I loved Europa.
We don't like Io?
Io's pretty good.
I was okay.
Io's kind of the teen moon because it's kind of zit-faced. It's full of
Oh,
volcanoes.
right.
Good on the
Right.
bear, too.
Well, for some reason,
yeah, right.
even though I've read this book a long time ago, I remember it being Ganymede. They go to Ganymede because there's some shit going on. And to cut to the chase, even though it's the year 2061, South Africa is still apartheid South Africa.
Mhm.
Why is that relevant? I'll tell you in a minute. The De Beers company is still around, and they're like the most important company on earth. And they discover that the monolith or something or whatever on Ganymede is they discover a deposit of diamonds.
cool.
So you think, who gives a shit? Well, 2001 is about heavy, important stuff. Why are we here in the universe? What is the nature of man? What is the nature of God? What is the nature of evolution?
Is this a fucking Diamond Heist book?
It's a diamond story.
Yeah.
And you go to
Ben,
26.
Ben is rubbing his fingers together, thinking of that sweet, sweet moolah.
So here's what happens.
Yeah, right.
They go to 20.
Take a
That's
hammer
the
to the
meaning
bottom.
of the universe,
2061
baby.
is they discover a cache of diamonds and they have to keep it secret, but then it leaks and the diamond market collapses. I'm telling you what actually happens in the book.
Wow.
And the world is thrown into chaos. And that's what the book is about. It's the most baffling thing.
What's 3001 about?
3001, I'm fully convinced, was just a book that Clarke wrote and then realized he could sell for more if he slapped 3001 off of it.
Yeah.
It's just set in the far future, and what it is Poole, who we haven't seen in a
Yeah.
while,
Yeah.
who dies early
yeah.
on.
Yes.
His essence was somehow saved, and he's back to life. And it's just the story is Poole is somehow resurrected, and he's learning how to live in the year 3001. And the whole gimmick is they screw in his brain, like the surgery scene is kind of gross. They screw in what's basically, it's like Ready Player One.
Mhm.
They screw in virtual reality.
They're Gunters.
They are Gunters, like me.
So 3001, The Final Odyssey, is just a story about like what would life be like with really good VR. That's it.
Wow.
But toward the end of his life, Clarke was not above making a buck where he could.
Sure.
He did a lot of sequels with like written by Arthur C. Clarke, big letters, and Joe Schmo in small letters.
Yeah.
He did a lot of that.
Well, Joe Schmo is a very celebrated
Very good
sci-fi
writer.
writer.
This is tangential, but I'll say
good.
it very quickly. I took the trip yesterday, as I think you know.
You went to Paris?
I went to Paris with Mrs. Harris.
Mrs. Harris.
Well, in the States here, we call it Mrs. Harris.
Yeah. Mrs. Harris.
But the romp of the year. Loved it. My favorite film of 2022. But I was texting with our good friend Bobby Finger about it because there are 4 books in that series.
Yes.
And I'm hoping they adapt the other ones with Leslie Manville.
Well, yeah, I mean, since Mrs. Harris Moved to Paris made $800 million worldwide.
Is that true?
No.
8 domestic, which is pretty solid. The third Mrs. Harris book, it just feels like what you're talking about with the 2001 sequels.
Yeah.
The third one is Mrs. Harris Goes to Parliament.
She sure does.
So like the second one's New York,
Yeah.
right?
We're in it.
The fourth one's Moscow. She tries to solve international relations there, right? But Mrs. Harris Goes to Parliament. If I can just read this quickly. Mrs. Harris finds that being nice, kind, and hopeful does not always lead to people being nice and kind in return. There is rather less comedy in this third book.
Damn,
I just
Parliament
like
really
this
breaks
idea
her.
that they did this swerve where it's
just
like
whoops.
Mrs. Harris warms everyone she meets. The third book, it's just like there's a limit to your niceless lady. But the opening section, super striking. But an example of this movie, just like kind of for how slow it is, going by faster than you expect. First live dialogue in this movie is 25 minutes in. It's when Floyd gets out of
The elevator.
right,
And it's such
says,
a
like,
weird line. She says, "Main level, please. Thank you, sir." Or
Yeah.
something like it's like that's the first line?
That's the first thing said in the movie. There's 15 straight minutes of the Moon Watchers, then like 10 minutes of the ships getting to understand space, the aesthetic of space, before you get into characters and dialogue. All of that feels like it's like it's pretty propulsive, weirdly, for how glacial and deliberately
It
paced
is propulsive, I think, especially to people, maybe if you've seen it already, because the images are so striking and you're waiting to see, I want to see the pen float.
I know where this is going.
I want to see
Sure.
the Pan Am logo. I want to see her feet, not because I'm a foot fetishist, I swear, but you want to see her feet as it's like clinging to the carpet and all that. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff.
I like the way that you can tell she has to get her feet just right for it
Yes.
to work, because you can see she's kind of like, oh, yeah.
Well, because they have 2 different techniques for all of these sets, where it's like they'll build one version of the set where the set moves and the camera stays still, and then one version where the set stays still and the
can
camera
go,
moves.
like 360. Yeah.
There's a lot of weird perspectives. The moon bus, for example, in some shots, the moon bus is zooming.
Yeah.
And then in other shots, it's very, very still because of the angle and where it's supposed to be. And it's very disorienting.
It's also, I mean, the modern principle, I say, is in the last 50 years, really post this movie of special effects, is that like you want to sort of make the audience think they know how you did the thing, and then you do something that breaks the rules, where you're like, fuck, now it feels like a magic trick, right? So there's like, I mean, infamous, like perfect, subtle execution of it is like all the Lieutenant Dan leg stuff in Forrest Gump, where you're like, well, they CGI'd this guy's legs out, but then they'll do things like he'll swing around underneath a table. And you're like, well, how are the real guy's legs not hitting the legs of the table? Or things like that. And the pen shot is just like, even for such an early point, they're doing that, where you're like, okay, cool shot, but you're not going to be able to touch the pen.
And then she grabs the pen.
You know, it's like either this is on wires or it's optically printed in some way, but there's no way she's going to be able to interact with it in the shot or whatever. It's like every shot in this movie is just sort of, it still feels impossible they pulled it off.
So Doug Trumbull, obviously the famous VFX artist behind this movie and behind many a great space movie, recently died this year, in fact.
Yes.
He says, one thing with the slowness is it was necessitated by the visual effects, right? If they moved anything too fast, like the stars would start to blur and all that. So that's why Stanley Kubrick starts falling in love with the Blue Danube, because he's like, everything's moving at Walt's pace, right? Like everything's so slow.
That's really smart.
And he starts playing them, the Blue Danube Waltz, over and over again, and starts recutting the sequence to it, because he's like, this is going to work perfect. A lot of people, including film critics, thought he had lost his marbles, goes Jan Harlan. But as Kubrick puts it, I wanted something that would express the beauty and the grace that space travel would have, especially when it reached the routine level where there's no danger involved. And then he didn't want it to sound futury. He didn't want like music that's like, meow.
Yeah, like Forbidden Planet had the theremins, and
exactly.
There
Those
was, of
fucking
course,
theremins.
there was a score commissioned.
Alex North. There's a whole score,
and it's out there. You can hear it. It's good, and there at the movie.
The movie would be a disaster with it. The score itself is good.
Yeah,
but obviously the movie is 50% the classical music.
And weirdly, the classical music gives the film a sort of lightness of touch and an odd humor.
Yes, it's funny.
The juxtaposition.
I mean,
well, and there's sadness too. I mean, look, there aren't that many musical cues. I mean, there's also Sprague Zarathustra,
which Fish does a cover of.
Well, they do the cover of the version by Emir Deodato that was in Being There with Peter Sellers.
Right.
The one.
Yeah,
so that started as a goof.
You know the.
All right, well, let's talk about.
There's like the disco version.
Let's talk about this very quickly. So
you've never heard that?
Do you know who Emir Deodato is? I believe he's Brazilian. He's also, I want to say, is it Justin Bieber's wife's grandfather?
Really?
I couldn't tell.
Is it Justin Bieber's wife, Stephen Baldwin's daughter?
Yeah, I think so. And it's still Emir Deodato.
So Stephen Baldwin's wife was.
All right, move on.
No,
I'm not looking all that up. I can't be.
But so it's this funky disco version. So
I can't delve into the Bieber family.
I just love how long this lasted, though. Where even like in the 70s, you have like the fucking disco Star Wars, like.
Yeah. Oh, I had that out. Yeah. So this, so Being There, Hal Ashby's final film.
One of my favorite movies of all time.
I mean, yeah. Well, so the audience knows this movie.
Yes.
Sellers, of course, has a tremendous Kubrick connection. And when he goes in the outside world and they need something big, and they were going to play the also Sprague Zarathustra, but they did the funky version instead. So there's a band. It's so good.
Ben's kind of into it.
Yeah.
Ben's really getting into it.
And it's like a 9-minute thing.
Yeah.
It's
now prior to this, Elvis loved 2001.
Now I'm just imagining
Hey,
Elvis
man.
singing it.
It's so crazy.
Well, Elvis,
They go to space. There's monkeys, and then they're in space.
but Elvis,
He's just here's a little tune. A movie called 2001.
First of all, Elvis had great taste.
Yes, he did.
He had great taste in movies.
Sandwiches.
The sandwiches.
It's a great sandwich.
He loved Monty Python.
Yeah.
He loved Monty Python.
Those guys are so funny, man.
Yeah, he loved the Bishop.
I'm a bit of a British comedy nerd.
So Elvis
What is this? The Spanish Inquisition?
almost immediately
Stepped
after the
on
movie took
Give
the
me some
music,
pills. That's unrelated.
the opening overture to also Sprague Zarathustra, and use it in his concerts. I mean,
Yeah. Cool.
this is
That's when his concerts were at their most maximalist.
in the late 60s,
makes
the
sense.
Aloha
Yeah.
concert from Hawaii, the 72 MSG concerts.
Yeah.
All of his live shows from that era open with the band doing the 2001 theme, and then
The thing, if you see an orchestra do that, do also Sprague Zarathustra,
Yeah.
it is you are like, it is crazy that these guys with these instruments just sitting here can make a noise that loud and
Yes.
like insane. Like if
Yeah.
you're just sitting in a concert hall, and it is one of those things where you're like pre-movies and fucking like when it was like the 18th. I mean, I know that's Strauss. It's from like the 19th century, maybe.
Yeah,
but still,
late
just imagine you're like,
1800s, yeah.
I'm gonna go sit in a room and this music is gonna be so crazy.
No, dude, I think about that all the time. Like a
Yeah.
timpani.
Yeah.
Just hearing someone smash a fucking timpani with a full orchestra is nothing better.
I'm gonna say a real dumb Griffin thing.
Here we go. Who was Zarathustra?
No.
Who is that guy?
This is one of those pieces where when I hear it, it almost sounds like it is an instrument. You know what I'm saying? I think it speaks to
You
like.
think it's Elvis going, duh. That's what you think it is.
No, but the loudness of the thing, even when like the drum is so pronounced,
Yeah.
I'm just like, these are just sounds.
Is
that are
it just
being
like a
pulled
synthesizer?
from the, no, not
Yeah.
even a synthesizer. I'm like,
Because it's
these
so
are just-
iconic, or
Yeah. It's like these noises are just being pulled from like the heavens.
wow.
I think you
Well,
could
that's
fuck with
The
timpani, man.
forcefulness of it.
Well, you
I
know,
really think you would like timpani.
yeah.
All right, let's get back to 2001. Now
All
I
right,
feel
so
like
you-
we are
So you
truly
go to
off track.
Haywood, right? And this is the sequence that's really sort of showing off. Here's how space works, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna start to see the thread of this thing, right? Okay, they've discovered this thing,
The monolith on the moon.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
he gives
yes.
the speech in that very
Clavius
bright,
base.
right? This guy's coming as like second wave follow up.
Yeah, important guy.
But a lot of this is like showing how space travel works, showing the weird commercialization of space, the sort
Which
of
I
space
love.
airport.
We still get snacks.
The sleekness
Yeah.
of it. Yeah, it's still nice. It's still like air travel in the 60s or whatever.
It's also wild that all of these scenes where like he's going through like immigration and whatever, where the whole thing is you're just seeing white rooms, right?
Yeah, there's a line about that, right, where like the initial thought was colors. Stanley was like, I don't know, could we do like IBM blue? And then they were like, no, just white and black. That's the most striking thing you could possibly
And most
use.
of these rooms, you're not seeing windows. There's no look to space in most of them. And yet, every time he's doing some boring sort of bureaucratic step or like, getting his Howard Johnsons or whatever, I'm like, it really feels like they're in space.
It's so
something
compelling.
about all of it. I'm just like, I believe that this is what. And like the only movie that I feel like comes close to this is cribbing from it so much, where like the way Ad Astra depicts space travel.
Oh yeah.
Is the one other film where I'm like, this feels realistic. This feels like how space travel
Right,
comes
which
place.
their version
I mean,
was-
it has the same jokes where there's like a subway on the moon.
Right,
Yeah.
Cinnabon
They're just
or
riffing on the
something,
same things
yeah.
and evolving
then
it a little
the joke
bit.
where he's like, can I get a travel pillow? And they're like, yeah, that's $800.
Right, just how quickly it will just become so
Have you seen
banal.
Ad Astra?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
And kind of annoying.
Yeah, he's not like thrilled to be on the moon in the space station. I mean, it's like, we never see the moon base really. We
No.
see it's probably the slowest sequence in the whole movie of the descent into.
Yes, I remember that being where my dad was like, don't worry, this is going to pick up again.
Yeah, when
like,
the
it
thing
does
is
get a
slowly,
little...
and it's on TV. It's not as exciting in the theater, but it slowly gets in, and then you cut to the conference room, and that's just a square. That's just a box with very bright walls, like insanely bright walls, and you have the photographer, and then he gives that bureaucratic speech about the cover story, and that's it.
And also the level of energy with which people are greeting this story, this discovery, the potential of what it belies, is like pretty similar to how everyone reacted to like fucking 3-4 years ago, the New York Times being like, yeah, no, the military's been tracking UFOs forever. We have a bunch of footage. There are a bunch of encounters. And it was one of those things where I have like a friend who had a friend inside the New York Times who was like, I can't tell you what it is, but there's a story coming that's going to change the world forever.
Yeah.
And it came out and it got like less coverage than fucking, some dumb think piece on like the latest Marvel movie or whatever.
Well, the marketplace of ideas is
things.
important, and we have to respect it.
I agree.
You
But
mean
are you
those
talking
stories?
the naval-
the
the
stories
naval
where it's like
videos?
Navy is like, these are UFOs. I don't know.
There've
Do with
been,
that
like,
what you will, right?
15 follow-up stories on this where they're just like, yes, of course, we do have a program where we tracked all these incidents that we can't explain. And here's all the footage and photos, and here are interviews with, like, we've now declassified all this stuff.
Weather balloons.
Right. And it's like, it's what it is in this movie, but every other movie like this makes it go like, this is going to change the firmament of the world forever. And instead people were like, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, right. But I think because
pretty
people
funny.
are waiting for like, come on, I want a phone call from an alien, baby. I want like a
E.T.
we come
phone
in
me.
peace. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Bring
this
the
is-
phone.
People are
to
saying
David.
this.
Also, if an alien showed up, I feel like they would have to really get over, like, people would be like, that's not real. Like, that's the world we live
today,
in now.
yeah.
Where people are like, I don't believe that.
That is with the what with the QAnon and all. I mean,
This
today
is what I'm saying. People are more like would rather spin out on the possibilities of Q than like government declassified
all right.
photos and footage.
We're
People
getting
are
us
just
back
like,
to
I don't know.
2001: A Space Odyssey. God damn it.
2001: A Space.
It is called Q1001 now.
One thing that is eliminated from the movie, but was originally going to be in it, was all this voiceover that Arthur C. Clarke did.
Yeah.
That was like narrating the movie. Obviously, another thing is Alex North's score. Poor Alex North. He worked very hard and was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And in the end of the day, Stanley Kubrick didn't like it.
Yeah.
Can I say something about the music?
Please.
Because we're on the topic of the music. Obviously, we got into also Sprach Zarathustra. There's Blue Danube is funny and counterpoint. This beautiful waltz with spaceships at the time, I'm sure, was even more revolutionary. It's been parodied now a number of times. The other musical cues, there's the scary stuff. Ligeti is his name, right? Georgi Ligeti. And from what I remember from Michael Benson's book, Kubrick didn't know what he wanted to use. This is the music that shows up a couple of times after the intermission, in the dark. You hear that spooky ass music. And from what I remember in Benson's book, Kubrick's wife had the BBC radio on, and it was their like new music hour. And she heard this scary music, and she's like, Stanley, I don't know what she sounded like. Come into the kitchen.
She sounded like that.
Put down your hamburger sandwich and run in. And he heard it and was like, wow, this is really cool. And then foolishly waited like a week and then called BBC and was like, what did you play last week? And they're like, what? And like, it was not an easy thing to go through the files.
Yeah.
It wasn't like now where you can go online and see what they played at noon.
Couldn't Shazam it.
No, he couldn't Shazam it. So it was like, but he eventually found it and sourced it. Then the other thing, and it's my favorite piece of music in the film, is Aram Khachaturian's Sad, when you first see Bowman and Poole and they're exercising, and when he's on the bed having the conversation with his parents, that kind of melancholy music.
Yes.
This is the saddest music in the world. I one time did a social experiment. I used to work in an office. If you can imagine this, 15 years ago. I haven't worked in an office in 15 years because society won't allow that. And when I
like the time we brought you into the Audio Boom offices and you said the C word really loudly on one.
Oh shit, did I do that?
And David had to say this is a professional workplace.
Did that happen? Oh yeah, I was doing a bit on
he was
Raging
relaying
Bull.
a story.
I was relaying a story from Raging Bull.
Yeah.
So and by the way, I don't cuss. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't cuss.
A clean man.
Aram Khachaturian, who by the way also composed music that's very uplifting. He wrote the theme song to comedy.
That's him. The funniest music
He
of all
invented
time.
music.
That's the comedy's theme song. You can see them running around. The clowns, Bart Simpson, they're all running around.
Yeah.
Meow.
Wow.
That's Aram Khachaturian.
Wow.
He also wrote the So I did a social experiment. When I worked at a company, I had speakers on my DOS computer, and I played on a loop this selection. It's just like in the background. I did it all day. And everybody was fucking bummed out that day. It was like everyone.
Well, you were also farting like crazy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's
You're
damn
crop
thinking why.
dusting.
Yeah, we're ripping them. In
No,
the
but you're saying right. It
So
just it sets the mood.
It sets the mood, and I that was like the one time I experimented. I did a Stanley Milgram style experiment on my coworkers, but I love that piece. I'm being sincere. I think it's such a gorgeous melody. And
it so quickly and efficiently establishes the loneliness of these
it's so
guys.
sad, yeah.
It is sad.
And he's playing chess. And by the way, Hal cheats at chess.
Yeah.
Go Google the chess scene. There's when Hal says, "I've mated you in 3 moves," and Bowman's like, "Oh yeah."
Yes, he doesn't describe his moves properly.
Yeah, and that's not a there's a whole.
There's no way that's
thread.
a mistake because Stanley Kubrick is like a chess nerd. Yeah.
So some theorize this is
It's like the first indication that something is up.
Some theorize that Hal is constantly making sure he has dominance over the human.
Sure.
Now, we've been talking about dominance at the water cooler and dominance in space with the Russians. Hal is the next tribe. He's the tribe of artificial intelligence. He wants to maintain dominance over the humans.
That's not what I think it is, though.
Well, this is one
What do you
theory.
think it is?
Well, I think it's like he's been told to he can't hold two like primary things in his head at once. So he's been told not to tell them about his primary programming, right? And he's like been told to help them, and he can't deal with it. And it's just like slowly fucking him up.
Interesting.
Because like he has this secret thing that he's not allowed to tell them, and it's like, you know, he's human. So they were like, psst, don't tell them.
Right, but
he's just churning away there, going nuts.
This is the more mainstream interpretation, and I think you're probably
like
right.
The government knows how to lie to people,
right?
But Hal is an innocent computer, right?
Sure.
He's not like built in. He doesn't understand why the government would want to lie to people.
He's actually, I mean, he's not malicious.
No.
He's clinical about all of this.
This is
which
the more
is scary.
This is the,
like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, to be clear,
this is the more
does some bad things.
ironically enough, this is the more humane interpretation of Hal.
Right.
I mean,
Rather than like,
so
he's a robot and robots want to take over the world or
Right.
whatever. Right.
He's kind of full of himself, though.
Do you think Hal's a little highfalutin?
Yeah, like the whole time watching, I was like, I wanted to be like to Hal. I'm like, what about Hal 1000 through 8000, my dude?
You should watch Hal's TikToks where he's like, first of all, and this just has to be said, I'm a very talented robot. It's just a fact. At this point, we have to accept it. I've been a talented robot my entire life.
I like this. This is I Googled. Like,
by the way, Hal
That will age perfectly 6 weeks from now.
Hal 1 to 8000.
Yeah.
Have you ever used preparation A through G on your hemorrhoids? Woof.
Oh boy. I just think this is so elegantly done. Where it's like the Haywood Floyd thing, it's like, here's a guy on a mission. We're watching the process of space travel. We're watching him on a job. He's trying to figure this out, right? Then it ends in this sort of like bombastic, like fucking monolith is breaking all their brains, white noise sort of thing. And then you cut to the ship, and it's like the mundanity of their routines, their exercise, their meals, the trays being too hot.
Yeah.
I love that you see like 4 different, like he has to shake off his hands kind of thing. Keir Dullea sketching his fucking sleeping
mummies
teammate, which is like so creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you wait like 10 plus minutes before they watch the BBC thing. And it's such a good way to do the sort of exposition dump that this movie's been avoiding for most of its running time. Because like, you're spending so much time in the mundanity, the loneliness, the boredom of their routine first. And secondly, it truly plays, unlike a lot of these movies where you do the news piece, right? The packaged news piece to explain everything.
First thing, yeah.
In this, it actually works as sort of character thing because you buy the energy of, we should see how this piece came out.
Right.
The sense of them watching it is sort of like, I want to make sure we came off okay. Even though they're not saying that, they're not overplaying it.
They're
It's
watching
like,
it as they eat their peas. They're eating
right,
their mushed
and it's just
peas
sort of like,
yeah.
I guess we should watch this and see how it made us look, right?
Yeah.
And so you're watching it through their eyes, which is funny, but you're also like, okay, now the movie's giving me the things I need.
Yeah, they don't comment. We don't even see their faces. It's kind of shot from behind. It's like you're seeing the tops of their heads as they eat. And of course, they're watching it on ostensibly iPads.
Yeah. Part of the routine is also like, what else do they have to watch? Like video messages.
Right. Yeah, the stuff from their parents.
They're not getting sent honeymooners, probably,
Obviously, there's the more sort of simple reading is that Hal does make a mistake in that he's like, hey, go fix that thing. And they're like, there's nothing wrong with that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, Hal is in trouble because they're like, is Hal broken? Let's turn him off. And Hal's like, you can't turn me off, bitch. I'm alive.
I'm Hal.
Yeah, you ain't. I'll turn you off. And here's how.
Yeah.
Like,
David
it's just pure self-defense.
Yes.
Like, right.
Yes.
But I just like that idea that he's slowly been degrading.
Yeah.
Quietly, kind of behind the scenes, and things like him cheating at chess or whatever.
Right. The moment where he says,
him being like, "Hey, go fix that antenna," and they're like, "What antenna?"
The thing where he says "just a moment" is so eerie because his dialogue is so smooth, and even when Bowman says, "Hey, you're doing your psych evaluations," he goes, "Of course I am." Like it's so eerie, and then he goes, "Just a moment," and you could tell that Kubrick recorded Douglas Rains saying "just a moment" once, and they spliced it and picked it up and put it next
the
to
same
it
line
to make it
rating.
sound exactly the same.
But also, he's not saying just a moment in the like just a moment processing.
No.
It's once again
error.
The weird familiarity of Hal is that like he sounds like your grandfather being like, you have to let me finish reading this chapter of the book before you bother me with something.
But it's the closest he sounds to a sci-fi robot.
Just a moment, it's like that kind of like.
But because it's repeated, it does have that, Lost in Space, warning.
Yes.
It's a little bit, it's just a hint of that. And that lets you see, oh shit, Hal is not a person. And for him to need a second, think about the bazillions of computations he must have just had to do to figure out all the permutations of how this is going to go. And he's like, no, I'm going to kill them this way. Oh my God, it's so freaky. Well, it's good shit.
The fact that the pod bay doors thing happens multiple times before it's going to be an actual point of conflict, right? So you understand what should happen. You understand the term. You understand like the keywords. They're supposed to trigger actions, whatever. But also them having the conversation in the pod.
Yes.
Where it's like, we got to get away from Hal.
Yes. Which suggests that they know that Hal can't hear that.
Absolutely. And they're like, Hal, turn it around. And then they're like, see, he's not working.
Yeah, right. He's but
versus Hal playing kind of dumb.
Right.
They're like, can he hear us? Maybe he can't hear us from in here. And it's like, no, Hal wants to read their lips. Yeah. He knows he can't hear them. He won't let them turn it around.
Put that together. You know what I love about the rotating pod is the moment when Poole is about to get killed. It's another one of these comedy shots. It's almost like a Michael Myers shot. He's in the background putzing with the satellite dish or whatever it is, and the pod is this way, and then it turns to face the camera. It's like it's a Michael Myers shot. It's so great. When it's in the foreground, we can see it happening, but he's floating in the background, and then it turns around to kill him. I mean, it also like the cut to the intermission. It's like a great like laugh moment in a way.
Yeah, it is, but it's also very chilling,
terrifying.
But like you're right, because like it's just when is Asimov's like laws of robotics or something like it's
the 50s, yeah.
Yeah, so like, but like, because I feel like with TARS and like for example in Interstellar, they'll just sort of talk in front of him of like, should we just send TARS into the fucking
TARS
black
is
hole?
just
And
a
TARS
guy.
is like, hey man, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'll do that. That's fine. And like also, but it's funny that they can't like in front of Hal be like, should we turn Hal off?
Right.
What's up with Hal? Like
Right.
they know he's touchy.
And also he's
If that makes sense. Like
he's like omnipresent. Like he exists in different forms
but it's
all
like,
over.
Yeah, he's not that one circle.
No, he's all over the place.
Then it's in that turning moment when they cut in, you see, oh, there's a Hal
There's
eyeball
another Hal here.
on the pod.
There's like a Hal in every room.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about it. It should feel, then I guess this is the thing about 2001. It
Yep.
should feel hacky
Yes.
now.
Especially
watch-
when we've seen everyone rip it off, parody it, or
Right.
both.
And like, Hal, it's very basic in a way. It's like, oh, the omnipresent robot, and he's so calm, and he turns out to be a psycho. He's not, but whatever, however you want to describe it. Doesn't feel hacky, like, or doesn't feel, it feels so original to watch every part of 2001
Yes.
today.
Absolutely.
It's pretty cool.
It's pretty fucking cool.
I go see it in the theater. I've seen it in the theater like 4 times in my life.
I
always have a
yeah,
good time.
theater again.
Oh, the telephone. Hello. Click. Hello.
Hello, and welcome to Moviephone.
Oh, hello, Moviephone.
Hi, David.
Wait, are you alive?
Yes, David, I am.
It's like Hal, you understand me.
Exactly why I'm calling topical.
All right, but not topical because you are, very much a thing of the past movie film. But
How
it is
can
nice
you
to
say
hear.
that? I am alive, moving forward in time. Just because my business failed does not mean that I am dead.
What's up? What do you want to talk about?
A new movie.
What's the new movie?
Today you're talking about 2001, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm here doing an ad for Decision to Leave.
Oh, you're talking about Decision to Leave.
Now playing at theaters.
I could probably look up specific ones if you want to know. If you need me to do your job
Not
for
really
you.
my job anymore. As you said, business went under. I just like advocating for art house classics.
It looks like it's going to be at the Angelica in New York on Houston Street.
A great theater built directly in between 4 subway stations and a crate and barrel.
I once bought curtains at that Crate and Barrel.
I love going to the Angelica so you can think about how much more comfortable both the chairs at Crate and Barrel and the subway seats are than what you're sitting in.
They do have good popcorn, though.
They do, and they're playing Decision to Leave.
Decision to Leave. Let me give you a little bit of background on
The new
Decision to
masterwork
Leave.
from Park Chan-wook.
That's right. And it's being put out by our friends at Mubi.
Movie.
Here's the synopsis. A mountain climber plummets to his death. Did he jump or was he pushed? When Detective Heijun arrives on the scene, he begins to suspect the Denban's wife. But as he digs deeper into the investigation, he finds himself trapped in a web of deception and desire. Has that ever happened to you, Moviephone?
Too many times to count.
So many webs of deception and desire.
Genre, family, adventure, romance comedy.
Well, wait a second. I think you're going
Drama.
haywire. I think I need to go into your
War,
circuits
action.
here. If you're calling Decision to Leave a family film.
Park Chan-wook always combines multiple genres.
He does. This is his
Is
newest.
there a family in the movie?
I mean, a husband and wife, that counts as a family. Yeah,
I think
sure.
so.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't
Not
try
really
to
any
create
kids.
a narrow definition of what
Exactly.
constitutes a family, so check yourself before you correct me.
I more meant family as a genre of films accessible to families, which Decision to Leave is not so much because it's from Park Chan-wook, who made movies like Old Boy
The
and The
Handmaiden.
Handmaiden. Yes. Slightly more adult films, and this is a twisted romantic thriller, but also a
Perhaps for
captivating...
the kid at heart.
Yes. Also a captivating detective drama. It's sort of a Hitchcockian film. And it stars the wonderful Tong Wei.
From Lust Caution and Black Cat.
Who we love and is giving a wonderful performance. And it's got lots of Park Chan-wook regulars.
Rated R. I assume?
I assume as well. Do
I just
movies
missed
even get
saying
ratings anymore?
Rated R.
It looks like it is. I can't even tell. I don't even. Where do you look up how a movie is
Rated G.
No, I don't think so.
Well,
But it is South Korea's international feature film submission this year at the Oscars, and it did well win Best Director at the Cannes Film Festival.
humble brag.
And look, it opens this Friday, October 14th, in New York and LA, and it's exclusively in theaters everywhere this fall.
I can't wait to see it.
It's
At
brought
a
to you
theater.
by Mubi, MUBI.com.
I think I'm going to come back again sometime.
Okay.
This feels like it has legs.
Okay, Mr. Moviephone. Goodbye. Click.
But yeah, this incredible intermission cut.
Love it.
I feel like a few movies cut to intermission at like the moment of peak tension. I feel like a lot of
No,
movies will
usually
cut
it's like,
at like
Okay.
right. There's a
Right.
release or there's
Yeah.
like
We're about
the
to jump-
looming threat. I
We're
see
about
what's
to jump
about
in
to
forward
hit
of
us.
time,
Right.
like ahead
I feel
in
like
time.
Lawrence of Arabia has a good cut to intermission.
Yes,
It's
but
a
it's
really
sort
good
of
one.
like there's a release
Yeah,
moment.
he just did the thing and he's walking out of the building and then he
Right.
cuts intermission.
Something like
yeah.
RRR is like here's the next level. The stakes
Yeah.
are heightened or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is like you cut at the moment where the threat is really crystallized and identified, like at the moment of peak sort of tension. In a weird way, I think if you're seeing this movie in theater and there's an actual intermission, you're walking out to the lobby, it's more unsettling because you're just like, get on with it. Don't make me fucking walk out now and have to
Yeah.
sit with this, you know?
What's also funny is if you watch it now on home video or on home box office maximum, there's this sound effect of that stays during the blackness for a few minutes of the sound effect of the sound of space, the sound of the spaceship, ambient sound, which is creepy as hell, you know.
And then we come back from this and it's like this is the sort of plottiest section of the movie, which is like
The murder of
It's but fairly brief.
Yes.
But yeah, it's it's really, and it's plotty, and yet it's only one character, two if you count Hal, but Hal's not
Sure.
moving.
yeah.
I like when David goes to get Poole and he's cradling him. It's like a pietà, right? So it's very there's as I mentioned earlier, a lot of Web 1.0 websites talking about the influence of, and you can find images of Christ being held by Mary juxtaposed with the shot of the pod and the spaceman.
The death of Hal is very, I remember even as a kid being very moved by it. It's very like melancholy
it's
and like,
it's very sad, and when he starts singing the song, it's spooky and
I'm afraid, Dave.
Yeah, no, it's heavy shit.
Dave, my mind is going.
Yeah.
I think it's also just incredible how that is basically how you would like design a mainframe or like a server, like the way that's laid out is like it's the same like principles
You mean
of like
today?
of the technology that we have today.
Yeah.
I love just watching him unscrew
Yes.
and just like again how like technology is still at its roots just screws and wires.
Yeah.
And like I think we've really forgotten that, I think in general, just because things have become so designed and streamlined for us,
Wireless
consumer
and
facing.
Interfacing on your phones, but like there's still, every time you do something on your phone, there's still a computer somewhere with the data plugged into something.
Yep.
It's funny. There's a line when they're talking about disassembling Hal, and they say something like, "We need to disassemble X, Y, and Z, but we need to maintain its rudimentary functions." And I remember one time feeling like they need to bring him back to the dawn of man. Like what those first ape scenes are like rudimentary functions. I want to eat. I want to show dominance, and I want to. Then that's it, and then maybe have a little ape child. And then you evolve through humanity. You go to the next stage, which is potentially artificial intelligence. And then it's like, we got to stop. We got to bring him back. I mean, this is like one of those heavy conversations you have when you've seen the movie 16 times.
Mhm.
But, that's something that I remember being really turned on by.
After he kills Hal, and he does kill him.
He
It is
does.
murder.
How found dead in a ditch.
He gets that video of Floyd being like, okay, hi, here's the secret message. Like, only Hal knows this, but you're here to investigate this, like, mysterious intelligence signal. Last lines in the movie.
Yeah.
Last line was like, it remains a mystery.
Yeah.
First line is, here you are, sir. Main level, please. And remains a mystery.
Basically, the first 25 minutes are silent, and the last 25 minutes are silent.
Oh,
Yeah.
In
And then
a
like
2.5 hour
like,
movie.
my God, it's full of stars. That's from the book. He doesn't say that in the movie.
That's
Right.
from the
Yeah.
book, and then it's in the 2010
It's in 2010,
movie
right.
also.
Yeah.
There is the what's the line he has? There is no reason to continue this conversation any further. Goodbye.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah.
What Hal
But
says?
when Hal gives his kiss off to Bowman and says,
Yes.
"I'm not letting you
This
back in the ship."
conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Right. That's Film Spotting uses that at the end of every episode, and so it is one of those things now
that's
where I've
fun.
listened to so many episodes of that when he says it, I do the fucking DiCaprio point.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
Oh, I had a question
what's up?
about the reveal of the plan that they're investigating the signal
Mhm.
that the monolith sent from the moon over to Jupiter,
Mhm.
but the whole crew is frozen. So if they see an alien ship or whatever, it's just two guys, and how? What are they going to do about it? Do you know what I mean? Like, if they are sent to investigate what could potentially be a threat, why would they freeze the crew? The crew's there to colonize, I guess, Jupiter or whatever.
I think the crew is there to do part of the investigation.
Yeah, that's what I thought. If this hadn't all gone awry, that was my
Yeah, like there's xenobiologists.
Presumption.
Like they never say what they are, but I always interpret it as like Bowman and Poole are they run the ship. They're
Right.
Kirk and Scotty, and then
someone's got to stay awake
Yeah.
in order to make sure nothing goes wrong.
Yeah,
Like
they're
Bowman isn't the one who is supposed to be doing this, or certainly not doing it alone.
Yeah,
Right, he's
It
more
just
the
doesn't seem
pilot.
like there's weapons. You know, it seems like they're going in peace a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, they're going to check it out.
Yeah.
They're taking a gander.
Right.
And
They're
I
sort
mean,
of
they're
throwing-
so far out in space, though. That's why, to me, I'm just like, they just seem so helpless.
But it's sort of they're just throwing people at the problem. They're
Well,
trying to
right.
figure out what the fuck is going on
Yeah.
while keeping the sort of buzz to a minimum. I mean, talk about why this ending is so unnerving when you're a child. I used to really freak out thinking about space being infinite as a child.
yeah,
It was one of those things that would just break my brain.
sure.
The idea where it's like, there's just like vast, endless. What do you mean? And the only thing kind of scarier than the idea of like you could just float in space forever and never reach any endpoint, is the idea that there is an endpoint and that endpoint is small.
Right, a little room.
You know?
But you just touched on something really relevant.
Yeah.
So there's a quote, a very famous quote that I'm going to read to you, and it goes like this: two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying.
Yeah,
And the person who gave that quote was Arthur C. Clarke.
it's pretty good.
So I
And
feel like you guys
JJ pulled that up for the dossier, and Kubrick was like, that was the thing that really
Right.
hit me. That was sort of the main, like,
Yeah.
I don't believe in God necessarily in a concrete
But
way,
it's
but I'm making a movie about the concept of God because both possibilities are scary.
the
Yeah.
philosophical
And if we-
push and pull of
Right.
that.
If we
yeah.
assume that God could exist in some abstract form beyond our comprehension, both possibilities are equally terrifying. Which
You
is
know,
like
a religious person would say both possibilities are wonderful and
Right.
exuberant. I think another equally understandable reaction is like, holy shit, what the hell?
Yes, no, it's equally terrifying to
Yeah,
imagine
every day you wake
that
up
this
and you're
is
still around. You're like,
a
whoa, whoa, whoa.
meaningless accident. And the only thing scarier than that is the notion that this was planned,
Right.
Well,
yeah.
designed consciously by
You know.
something.
If God does exist, I think that I wouldn't say he was evil, but you could say he was an underachiever. That's another line.
And
so,
look, if God does exist, I can't wait to meet her.
hey,
And I'm holding for applause.
I just think it's interesting that he goes through the Stargates and he sees all the colors, and then it's the cigarette smoking aliens from Men in Black who are like, "Hey, we created everything."
They were kind of the original Wattos, I'm realizing.
They were a few
Little
years
bit.
earlier than
2 years. They had
Watto,
2 years
yeah.
on Watto.
does the Stargate sequence go on too long?
I mean, I just love it. The only thing about the Stargate sequence is that there's that bit where there's like some sort of globy things.
The
that are kind of
diamonds.
yeah. Where
Those are
I'm like,
those are superhighways.
I know. I think they're cool.
Yeah.
They're the one thing that feels like a little kind of like
It's
dorky
maybe
and
the
60s.
only
you know,
aged-
like,
yeah.
right?
It's a
'cause
little,
even when
like,
they just do
screensaver.
the sort of inverted
Woo!
color waves
Yeah,
and
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Even that's cool.
That's cool. Yeah, the diamonds are the one thing.
It's a little Tron.
It's a little Tron. I love Tron, but
Yeah.
it does date the movie to the moment a little bit more. It's another thing where if you'd asked me for my memory seeing this movie as a kid, I'd be like, well, the Stargate sequence lasts for 30 straight minutes. Like as a child, I was like, this is half an hour of lights and sounds and colors.
Yeah.
Where it's like 10, 12 minutes. It's shorter than the creation sequence in Tree of Life.
Is it? Okay.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I would have said it went on too long, and then watching it this time, I found it was actually pretty breezy.
I feel like once you are aware that it's, and I mean, now everybody knows, the ending of 2001 is a bunch of wacky shit on screen for a while. Once you settle in, it's pretty cool.
Right. When I was 12, I didn't know that. I didn't know it was ever going to end. I was like, am I going to fucking watch this for an hour?
So do they pull him through a wormhole?
That I believe is the case. It goes, they drop him through a wormhole, and then that moment, the shot of the diamonds, those are intersections. This is from my memory of the book, which I read a long time ago, but that's like, take an exit on the turnpike,
Sure.
and then you go through another wormhole, and then you appear in this place. And then at the end, the Star Child or the Moon Watcher, whatever the hell they want to call him, they send it back to Earth. And whether that's Bowman reincarnated or not, this becomes open to interpretation. When I was a kid,
Sure.
and my mother was trying to calm me down, as I mentioned, I had a bit of a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
My mother was like, hey, it's just a baby being born. It was reincarnated. And this was a thing for me because at the time, I was 8 years old. I was kind of obsessed with the concept of reincarnation.
Uh-huh.
And when I was 8, I was very worried that I was going to become reincarnated in my next life. And I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be a blade of grass
Sure.
because I didn't want people stepping on me all the time.
Yeah.
Makes
And
sense.
this was a very, very big concern for me.
I thought you were going to say you didn't want to be a giant space fetus, because then who the fuck are you going to talk to?
I mean, in retrospect, there were a lot of things I
you
probably
don't wanna
didn't
be.
want to be.
Yeah.
But I was fixated on the blade of grass because I think that's part of the Hindu thing?
You always say we're all connected. The blade of grass is always invoked.
Right. The blade of grass is a thing.
It's
I
one
think,
of the.
I
Yeah.
think I may have heard I heard the phrase blade of grass and
Yeah.
it stuck in my head. And when the concept of reincarnation, I was like, fuck, blade of grass, that's my number. I'm like, oh man, stuck on the lawn, everything's
Sucks.
happening up there.
Yeah, what a
Just
bummer.
me and the ants.
Yeah.
Occasionally Rick Moranis' children. I mean, just like nothing going on. So this really worried me. And if you're 8 years old, you don't want to really, you trust your parents. I had very caring and loving parents.
Mhm.
Like, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. I don't want to say it. It's embarrassing. So the first night you don't sleep, the second night finally you're crying in bed. You're 8 years old. Why are you upset? I'm going to be a blade of grass. And my parents are like, weirdo kid.
Fucking loser.
What a loser. What do we raise? My father wants to smack me around. Act like a man, like the Godfather. But no, caring,
Be a man. Yes,
caring and loving parents with their insane child. And I think my parents, who were, didn't want to negate beliefs of the Eastern origin, were like, well, there are many who believe in reincarnation, but I don't think you're going to be a blade of grass. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think so. So you really shouldn't worry about that, and instead worry about your asthma or whatever else is bothering you today. So
I think if we can dig in a couple of things that I think make this ending so upsetting and unnerving. One, it's like this idea that, as you said, they're like, look, see, we built a normal, comfortable room for you, a hotel room to your specifications.
It's just what you want, right?
But everything, you got this Kubrick, like, wide angle, deep focus kind of thing.
bright and blue.
Right, but they're like no windows. Everything feels like a little too like fluorescent. Like it's just sort of
Even the styles that are being referenced don't really match.
No, it's like it both looks like
I wouldn't stay there.
like a Parisian hotel standing from the 1600s, and it looks like
Donald Trump's
a
bedroom.
Holiday Inn or whatever.
Yeah, no,
right.
I'd give it 3 stars on Yelp. Tops.
Yeah, like not a fun environment, but also just the device of Bowman seeing something, right? The sort of Kuleshov effect thing.
Transference of point of view.
It's
He sees the thing, you cut back again, the first thing is gone. You've jumped 20 years.
I think it's one of the most powerful
Ooh.
applications of the edit I have ever seen. The cut, where it's like you're doing so much. You're changing point of view. You're changing consciousness. You're changing time. You're doing time. Everything is like shifting. But this sort of thing of like seeing Keir Dullea face. He's so good in these close-ups, right? Seeing him observe something. That anticipatory dread of like, do I want them to cut to what he's looking at so I can like cut the tension, or do I not want
Do you
to
not want to
see?
even see it? Is
And
it
then you
see
scarier
it,
to not
because there's
see
no
it?
grounding. Like
Right.
you as an
Right.
audience member, you're like, I'm so lost and floating, and it's frightening because it's like, well, he can't go back.
And these
You know.
shots are so sort of cold and pulled back that it's always a little bit abstract at first. It takes a moment to identify that's him, that's the same guy, and by the time you can confirm it, you are now that guy.
You're stuck.
You're
Stuck.
the previous guy's gone. He's in this dude now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just the moment you recognize the pattern and go like, oh fuck, this is gonna keep on going. Where does this go? It's wild.
I think it's cool, but it spooked me when I was a kid. It really did
Spooky.
spook
and
me
there's
when I was a
no,
kid.
and the sound, like it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
total silence until he drops his plate or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I just looked up the murals that are in the room. They are so chilling.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's not a detail that I feel like you could really see like at home on a TV. And I definitely have never noticed that like a theater screening. But looking at this article here on Popular Mechanics, it is really disconcerting in
Yeah.
a way where it's supposed to look like Renaissance paintings, but it's just there's
It's
something
wrong.
not right about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think it's very similar to the furniture and the rooms design, but something for people to look up at home.
Have either of you guys read the Jack Kirby Marvel 2001 series?
Oh, you know, I
No.
haven't
I
read
mean,
it, but I know it's around.
It's cool
yeah.
that it exists.
Yeah, and I think like Fourth World essentially
Yeah.
comes out of it. I mean, obviously he moves from Marvel to DC, but by all accounts, it's sort of like because he was able to embellish.
Yeah, didn't he like do a whole series? Like he
He did a whole series.
like the
It's-
first
it's-
three
wasn't just
issues
that.
are the
It's a
movie,
10
and then he went
issue-
bananas with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does Ron Space Knight come
It's-
out of that?
No, it's Machine Man.
Machine Man. Thank you.
Yes. Not to be nerdy, but
Ron
yes.
Space Knight was a Hasbro creation that he was
right,
hired
right,
to
right,
work.
right.
But yes, no, Machine Man. Like, there's a Marvel character that
And
still
my
exists
fantasy
that
baseball team is called DeGrom the Space Knight. I'm not joking.
comes out of that, and sort of it starts him on the paths of thinking that lead to when he goes over to DC, being like, I think I can create a whole mythology here. I don't know how readable it is though. Like, is it one of those things that's stuck in like
Don't know.
legal gray?
I
area
would
because of
imagine
the
so
rights?
because there was one time when I went to go find it and it was
Yeah.
difficult to find, and I did find. I went on like Pirate Bay or something,
I don't
and I
know if it
downloaded PDFs, and I
has ever existed
forgot about it until this
in
conversation.
trades. I don't think it's on the Marvel apps or anything.
Yeah,
I think
you
it's
can buy them on eBay for a lot of money,
the
or you
single
can go,
issues,
Go to
yeah.
Pirate Bay. Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that like this feels like such an untouchable movie, and yet Arthur C. Clarke made 3 sequels.
Yep. There's a
They
sequel
made
movie.
one of those sequels as a movie that people were like, well, obviously it doesn't touch 2001, but it's not an embarrassing 3 out of 4. And then like Jack Kirby did all these comics about it.
It's
you
not
know?
that untouchable. Yeah.
It's not that
Well, it's like
untouchable.
Jaws too. Like
Yeah.
people talk about like one day they're going to remake Jaws, like heaven forfend. It's like
Right.
they did Jaws 3D for Christ's sake.
Yeah,
they did
like 3
Jaws
of-
4 The Revenge.
Right.
This time it's personal. I mean, Jaws has been tinkered with.
They used to franchise out these classics, but it just no one would. It wouldn't stick to the legacy of the original film
Right.
in a way, you know.
Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, the movie.
Yes.
Alice the sitcom.
Yes.
Very
Right.
different properties.
It was a commercial success, but initially not a critical hit.
Mhm.
New York's critics were confounded and bored. It premiered at the Capitol Lewis Theater on Broadway, and apparently 240 people walked out,
Wow.
which is a lot.
Yeah.
And Stanley Kubrick's reaction was like misery. He was like, I fucked it up. This is
Yeah.
no good.
Then he
Like,
cut like 12 minutes or
Yeah.
something.
and then, as it starts to commercially come out, it's one of those movies where it's like people are lining up around the
Finds its
block.
audience.
Like,
Yeah.
he
He wins the Oscar for special effects.
He does.
The Oscar is weirdly given to Kubrick and
Yes.
not to Trumbull. It's the only Oscar Kubrick
it's
ever
incredibly
wins.
rude to Trumbull.
It's
It's fine
incredibly-
because obviously Kubrick had a major role overseeing the visual effects, but it's bizarre.
But they essentially give him the Oscar because they're like, well, everyone was working for you. It was your vision.
Yeah, even in Benson's book, which is very pro Kubrick, they
Right.
paint this chapter as a little bit of a dick move
Obviously
on his
bizarre.
part. Yeah.
It's simultaneously weird that this is his only Oscar and that Trumbull doesn't get a statue.
Right.
Well, even Trumbull was just like he was part of a team. I mean,
But
he was
it's-
one of the main guys, but he wasn't the solo guy.
It's just
No, but he's the guy who comes off of
He
this
comes-
with like
yeah.
being the sort of guru.
He was the guru, and certainly they had 3 different set designers. One left. One of the production designers left midway, but a lot of his work is still in there. You also had The very young Andrew Birkin was very involved as like a jack of all trades helper on production. There's a whole thing in Benson's book about how he went to Africa to shoot the footage for the for two things, for the Dawn of Man sequence, and also you mentioned earlier those solarized images
Yes.
in the Dawn of Man stuff. He attached a camera to the bottom of a helicopter, and there was a plane crash or something like this. All kinds of weird stories. How they moved a tree, some kind of fancy tree. They moved it around
Split
Southwest
screen
Africa.
photography, I think, is the name of
yeah,
that technique
the-
that he uses for the
for the Stargate. So he kind of
Right.
Trumbull kind of invented that, and Kubrick found Trumbull, I believe, because he had done stuff at the World's Fair.
That makes sense.
Is that correct? Is it that the World's Fair, was that the connection? He had seen something for like the Futurama exhibit or something, and said that's my guy. And then he made Brainstorm, which is a great movie.
Yeah.
Brainstorm's a very cool movie. It's just interesting that this like sort of high art, super intellectual experimental movie was savaged by the New York
Yeah.
literati. Like
Yes.
Renata Adler was the film critic for the Times of the, John Simon, Judith Christ, Andrew Saris. And then when it starts to expand, like more regular America is like, we dig this. Like, yeah, bring it around.
And maybe it was our first Kubrick episode. We talked about how like 2001 is most people's first Kubricks. Most people are shown it by their parents at a young age, like we talked about. And then someone on the Reddit was like, Griffin and David showing their like coastal elite to everyone watches 2001 when they're a kid. And then like 20 people responded and they're like, I grew up in like a trailer park. My dad was like an auto mechanic. He didn't care about movies at all. He showed me 2001 when I was 9.
Yeah.
There might be a
Big movie.
generational thing where now that we're aging out of parents who grew up with this movie,
Right, yeah.
then perhaps future generations, people younger than us, aren't being shown this film at a young age. But it was this thing that was like a very populist sort of like just an important totemic thing you need to witness at
my
some
mother
point. It was like a
disliked-
ritual.
Yeah,
of
my
growing
mother
up.
has no interest in sci-fi, which is ironic because so much of my career has been about Star Trek. She made fun of Star Trek my whole life.
Yeah.
But she,
Okay, well, that's rude.
yeah,
Star
that's-
Trek.
Yeah, I know. But she, when the video box was close, she's like, oh, of course I've seen this. Like it was
Right.
a movie you had to see. It was the #1 at the box office that year, I believe.
2001: A Space Odyssey was,
Yeah.
let's see, 1968.
But it's like in that like Wizard of Oz canon
Oh yeah,
of
yeah.
just like
It's a big milestone for
Right.
sure. Everybody saw
the
it.
second most successful film of 1968 behind Funny Girl.
wow.
Well, Barbara, I mean for
Yep.
sure.
Of the other big movies that year, The Odd Couple,
Mm-hmm.
good
funny
movie.
stuff.
Yeah, it's a good
Bullet, he drives.
Yeah.
Good.
Oliver, got to pick a pocket.
Not a very good movie.
Let's play the box office game.
But yeah,
Wait, can-
weird that this movie wasn't nominated for Best Picture or Best
Wasn't.
Director.
Wasn't. It's true. Very rude in my opinion. The box office game. This movie comes out in April 20, April 1968.
Okay.
Opens number 4. Pretty
Yeah.
good,
Pretty good.
but then just runs for a long
Ever.
time.
Yeah.
Man.
Number 1 at the box office is a generationally important film. It's been number 1 for weeks and weeks, and it's going to keep being number 1. It's a huge movie.
The Graduate?
It's The Graduate.
Holdover from 67, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Wow.
Which came out Christmas 67, so it's been about 4 months, but it's been number 1 for months.
Yeah.
Do you like The Graduate?
It's one of those movies I have always respected more than
I'm
I've
the
liked.
exact same way with it. It's never been a movie for me.
And it was I was
I
like,
like it.
I
I
was
get it.
obsessed with Rushmore, and everyone was like, "Well, you got to watch The Graduate. That's the thing.
Yeah,
That's the Rosetta Stone of this movie."
for sure.
And I watched it, and I was like, "It's okay. I get it. I get it. It's very good." And then I just every 5-8 years, I'm like, I should give that another swing and see if it finally really connects with me. And I always just respect it, understand its importance. It doesn't grab me viscerally in the way like 2001 does.
I think the first 2/3 of The Graduate are A+, and then the final third does kind of, the air gets out of the balloon a little
I agree,
bit.
but then the ending's also like
Ending's
maybe the
obviously
best
good.
part.
And the last 5 minutes are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Number 2 at the box office is one of your favorites.
It's one of my favorite films.
Science fiction film of 1968.
The original Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes.
How long has that been out?
10 weeks.
Yeah, wow. Big
Doing
hit.
good.
Big hit.
Big hit. Yeah.
Kind of the first modern franchise has always been my argument.
Mm-hmm. And very different from 2001, but it's a big sci-fi year. Is all
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Is also a movie where I feel like people's cultural memory or imprint of Planet of the Apes is very colored by the sequels, and people forget how talky and slow the first movie is in particular, where it takes like 45 minutes to see an ape, and then it's a series of conversations and a twist ending.
Yeah. But what's her name?
Kim Hunter?
No, what's her name? I forget her. The actress.
Nova.
Yeah.
What's her name again? I don't know.
Very, very becoming.
Yes.
Number 3 at the box office is a Western starring Burt Lancaster and Ozzie Davis.
Huh.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. Had you heard of it before?
Telly Savalas and Shelley Winters.
That's a good cast.
Good cast. Directed by Sidney Pollack.
What is this movie?
Anyone know it?
I've never seen it, but I don't know if I've heard of it.
It's called The Scalp Hunters.
Wow.
Jeez, I've never heard of that one.
It's an early Pollack, his third film.
Wow.
The
Ben,
Scalp
I thought you were about to
Hunters.
say that you'd actually seen that movie, and I was going to be
Yeah, Ben was
surprised.
sitting up.
No, I have not.
Number 4 is 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Uh-huh.
Number 5 is a comedy that wouldn't fly today, starring a Kubrick collaborator.
It's a Peter Sellers movie called The Party.
It's called The Party.
Yeah.
Blake Edwards is The Party.
Party
with Peter
is
Sellers
intense, man.
as
The Party is
Hrundi
intense.
V. Bakshi.
Yeah.
Bakshi. Bakshi. Yeah.
Do
everybody's-
I want to know why it wouldn't fly?
Peter Sellers in brown face doing like an Indian
oof.
accent,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
sort of. Yeah.
Is the Party? Is it done with good intentions? I don't know.
I remember seeing it as a kid and having a parent showed it to me, not my mom, like a different parent. It was like, this movie is racist, but I don't know. Peter Sellers is funny. Like,
Yes.
and you watch and it's mostly just because it's set at a party and it's just him getting into various little, like, he's always
There's sort of incredible
causing trouble by
comedic
mistake.
construction
Right.
in it.
It's like one long set. It's all set in one house,
Right.
and it's him just
It's
making
sort of Jacques
mistakes.
Tati.
and-
So like people don't want
Yes.
to totally throw it out because it's not just like, oh, here's Mickey Rooney in the bathtub.
Yes.
It's like there's
You know.
things worth studying in this movie. It is
It's a tough one.
funny.
I mean, like Mr. Bean is very obviously inspired by Peter Sellers in general,
Yeah.
but like that character that he's playing, and it's obviously also it's like, well, Clouseau's doing French, here he's doing Indian. What's the problem?
Yeah,
it's
that's
the
kind of
'60s, right?
Now, is he actually in brown face? Did they darken his
Yes.
skin?
Oh yeah.
He has-
No, it's fucked up. It's
I
not
mean,
good.
probably if that movie he played a French butler or a British butler,
It would have been.
and it was
okay,
the
yeah.
exact same film, it would be like considered one of the 10 canonical comedies.
Right. Right. Because it's
Yeah, it's
got
Blake
all this.
Edwards too. I mean, it's a real.
Yeah.
It was a huge. Well, as you say, it
It was
was.
a big hit.
Huge hit.
Some other movies in the top 10. Gone with the Wind. Heard of it?
Yeah.
Talk about canceled.
That's a little bit on the canceled.
They just bring it back
Um,
every
Yeah, it's just been reissued again. You
5
want to go see
years,
fucking Gone
whatever.
with the Wind?
Yeah.
Go enjoy it.
Yeah.
Has it
there's
been? Are you saying it's really been reissued?
no, in
not
1968.
recently.
I thought you meant
it
now,
was
yeah.
every 5 years until
No,
like
it
the
would
early
be
90s,
complicated to
pretty
reissue
much.
it now. It'll happen sometime, probably for the 100th anniversary, which is like not
Yeah.
actually that
This
long.
is a.
Oh, God,
You know,
yeah.
it's a real conversation.
Yeah,
I mean,
anyway,
what
we're
do
not
we-
going to get into a Gone with the Wind conversation. There's also The Fox with Sandy Dennis,
Not after the Fox with Peter Sellers.
based on D.H. Lawrence. No, not that. There's Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, another 67 holdover.
That movie stinks.
Ben is trying to. He's putting.
You're trying to guess who?
Trying to come up with a guess.
No, here's what I'm trying to do
David's flipping up the.
because I'm doing the board game.
It's Henry.
Yeah. Oh, Henry.
Henry.
Guess who's coming to dinner? Can we just? This is a boring.
I
movie.
rewatched it sometime in the last 5 years. It's got its moments where, like, you know, an actor, especially what's her, you know, Bea Richards, who's the mom, like, they'll have like a speech where you're like, well, you know, they did a good job with that. Like,
But that's very much a
Big
movie
acting.
where you have to go like, imagine when it came out.
exactly,
right.
right.
Like
It's
you
not- it's
really
not-
have to put on the prism of
That movie's
the time.
homework.
It's
Yes,
also the Spencer
yes.
Tracy thing of like he's dying.
Yeah.
And so you are watching this guy sort of like summon his last ounce of strength.
Right. I
don't
think
know.
that's the Clooney is like so obsessed with Spencer Tracy and talks about that's the movie where you literally see him mid take check where his mark is. And he was
Really?
just
Yeah.
like he was an actor of such conviction and naturalism that you even respect
that
that as a
seems right,
move of
yeah.
honesty. Where he
There-
like takes a step, starts talking, looks down, adjusts to the mark, keeps talking.
Wow.
Camelot, the
sure.
adaptation of the musical
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
by Lerner and Lowe with Richard Harris, and
bad.
a movie called The Secret War of Henry Frigg, starring Paul Newman,
Huh.
which is like a military drama. I've never
Huh.
seen it.
No.
Who directed that?
Jack Smite.
Oh, Jack Smite
who
has
made
a lot of
Rabbit
good movies.
Run and
Yeah.
you know, I
Wow.
don't know, some stuff.
Can I just say quickly, merchandise spotlight, Kubrick was always really protective of not letting people merchandise his movies, and now in the last like 5 years, it's really opened up. Company Super 7 I like a lot has made a series of figures that are first American toys based on 2001. I ordered the Moonwatcher that comes with the monolith and Bauman that comes with Howl Last Night. Thank you. I had to say this on mic so I can write it off as a business expense.
Hey,
I was waiting to order it until we got to the episode.
Good job, buddy.
Wait, can I? How? I suppose I mean,
I'll send you the links. They're really good.
no. I'm wondering if I were to mention it on the air and I were to buy it, would it be a tax write-off for me?
Sure,
Maybe
I'm
try
gonna
it.
pay you for the episode, so you know.
Well, I mean, you bought me a pastry,
I did. I bought you a panda
so
bun.
that was goods and services for my time.
Absolutely.
Hence,
We pay our guests now.
you do.
Yeah, you'll get some
Yeah,
cash in a
you'll
bit.
get
Are you
Okay.
being serious?
Yeah, we're being serious. We're an upstanding business.
we pay our guests.
I didn't know this.
But it's happened in the time since the last time you were on. It started
Yes.
right about then.
I would have pushed to been on much sooner if I'd known this.
You'd be every week. You'd be like knocking on the door.
You need
Are
it
you at
scratching.
Are you at? I mean,
Can I do the? I don't fucking know. What do you got coming up next week?
first of all, I insist that this part do not be edited.
No, this is in. Are you
Oh,
fucking
this
kidding
is
me?
staying
Yeah.
in. We're gonna
Now-
triple it.
What I want
You
to
know how much they're complaining right now about the episodes being too short. We're just gonna have dead air.
Hold
for
on.
an
Hold
I'm
hour.
gonna have you go in the bathroom and take a shit, and we'll record.
Jordan,
it.
I
You know,
sent-
don't you
I
think
sent
for
you
the
the
Eyes
link.
Wide Shut episode,
Wait,
they're
wait,
like, oh, it
no.
should be 6 hours long.
Yeah.
Let's just let it run for another 3
Now,
hours.
we were talking a lot on this program today
Yeah. By the way, I do have to catch a 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and we gotta be
3,000
done.
years of longing. We
Yeah.
were talking on the program today.
about 2001 and how it's about the bending of space and time
Sure.
and evolution
Yeah.
and jumps in time.
Absolutely.
So we recognize that fourth dimensional travel is a possibility.
Yeah.
What I'm driving at is I've been a guest on the show earlier. Can I invoice you
Oh,
for my
boy.
previous?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah, fuck it.
Fine.
Okay,
Lord.
but that
Yeah.
money goes towards ordering the fucking action figures. I
I
sent
love
you the
Super
link.
7. I've gotten
They're
some. of their
great.
shit
They're
before,
good. They
yeah.
do clothes. I love them. They should sponsor the show.
All right,
Um,
everyone's. We gotta stop.
We gotta
It's
be done.
over. I gotta
Well,
go see
no,
the George Miller
I
movie.
mean, just
Talk about time travel. You'll have already heard me do the 3,000 Years of Longing episode at this point.
I just feel like we have to fucking mention that we're going back to the moon, baby. NASA's going back.
That's
That
true.
happened this week.
The Artemis Project.
And I've been reading all this stuff about it.
Yeah.
And what's kind of depressing and like very on the money is that what I'm seeing is like we're gonna get a base on the moon and then we're gonna figure out how we can start to harness minerals,
Helium
and then
free.
basically figure out how to continue to go further from there.
I also think this is the opportunity to mention 2 things with specific dates on them. I think this is the time to. I'm doing it very quickly. I have to go see a movie. October 21st on Patreon, 2010, the year we made contact.
Yeah,
We're
we
doing
already
an
said
episode of that. I
that.
just want to give the date for when it's happening because
Sure.
we've mucked around our schedule a little bit to make it fit.
Yeah.
I do think this is the moment we should announce the 2022 Talking the Walk.
Yeah, let's just announce it. Yeah.
Our main franchise of talking famous cinematic walks with J.D. Amato. On December 11th, we're talking the moonwalk. We're going to discuss the moon landing
Oh.
with J.D. Amato and how it could or could not have been faked by
To
Stanley
be clear, it was not faked by Stanley Kubrick.
But we're going to talk on a technological
it was-
level the reasons why.
Sure. We'll talk about
Yeah,
something.
I
So
don't
you're
know.
walking and podcasting
Oh, you think
at
it's
the same
fake?
time?
Yeah,
It's not fake.
Where are you going to walk?
on the floor.
Oh, all right.
But backwards.
You know what you can do, Ben? You can actually point a fucking camera at the moon. There's flags on it. They're just still there.
They're still there. Jordan
'Cause we
Hoffman,
left them there.
Ba-ba.
thank you for being here.
I hope everybody had a good time
Great
listening. I had a good time being here.
I'm glad.
I'm probably not going to have a number 2 in Ben's toilet
Yeah.
Sad.
because it's just, you can't control your bowels.
You can't.
And I don't
Well, you can to some extent.
I can't
Yeah,
force,
Dave Englund can
I
from
can't force it out
Jackass.
when it's not ready. But I don't want to go out on that note. I want to say a few things. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
Pleasure's all ours.
But now that I know there's some money involved, I'm overjoyed to be on your show. I'm assuming that you will not be requesting W-9 information from me because I'm not filing this on my taxes.
Great.
And
Round of applause.
I also. No, I mean 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's a great. I hope people who haven't watched it in a long time
Yeah.
watch it again. Yeah, for all
I've
we know,
avoided watching it because it feels like some, dare I say it, monolithic thing.
Yeah,
Some stodgy sort of.
it is a
piece
little
of
slow, and
history.
it's a little slow at home. So if you're gonna do it, like don't watch it on your laptop. Like do it up, dim the lights.
Sure.
put down your phone.
Yeah.
If you're going to watch HBO Max's print, is pretty good.
Mhm.
Sit on the couch and really focus, and you're going to dig it.
If you can catch it in a theater, all the better.
Oh, 100%. Listen, not all of our listeners are in New York City.
No, most of them are not. Thank you all for listening. Jordan, thank you for being here. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Round of applause to us for doing this. Thank you to Marie Barty. Round of applause for social media helping to produce the show. AJ McKeon, Alex Barron for our editing, JJ Birch for our research / the Kubricktionary, Lee Montgomery, the Great American Novel for our theme song, Joe Bow and Pat Reynolds for our artwork. You can go to blankcheckpod.com for some links to some real nerdy shit, including our Patreon, which will feature the upcoming teased Kubrick tie-in episodes. Tune in next week for A Clockwork Orange with Alex Ross Perry, a very short and concise episode.
Yeah. If this one felt too long to you, don't worry. The next one's also too long?
Yeah.
Is this episode longer than 2001 the movie?
Probably.
Yeah, I think we beat it by a couple minutes. And as always, pre-cum.